Hello, everybody, and welcome to a spoiler discussion on the biggest film of 2022, the ninth installment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe from 2021 alone. Oh, did I say 2022? It was the biggest movie of 2021. Whatever. Spider-Man: No Way Home. This is the third film in the Sony-Marvel partnership Spider-Man films. It is directed by John Watts and stars Tom Holland, Jacob Batalon, Zendaya, Jon Favreau, and Marissa Tomei. Like the others, this time it brings back Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina, Jamie Foxx, allegedly Thomas Hayden Church and Rhys Ifans, as well as Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. So I am one of your hosts, Connor Nielsen. Joining me, as always, on his own channel is the Comics Kid 2099. Say hi, Comics Kid.
Hi, Comics Kid.
And we have a special guest, the illustrious Ben Thompson.
Yeah!
Hello there.
Ben, why don't you give us a plot synopsis of Spider-Man: No Way Home?
So, after the last movie happened and Spider-Man had his Dropbox leaked onto the internet and his identity doxed, he is unfortunately framed for murder and then taken out of the murder charge by cameo number one, known as Matt Murdock, where he then asked Doctor Strange to, give everybody roofies so they forget about what happened. And he's like, yes, I'll do that for you, but I'm also going to bring in a bunch of villains from other universes who know people who look just like you. Sorry, no, they'll have your name, but not look just like you. They're going to come in. They're going to be evil. You're not going to want to kill them because that's what people do when they wear costumes and they don't want to rob banks. And then you stop them from being evil. You meet up with your other spider friends, and then they go home. And then, oops, you give everyone the space roofies, and now they all forget who you are. The end.
Yep, that sounds accurate.
I made that up on the fly, and I was like really struggling about halfway through there.
So I had never seen this before. Ben, you had, and Connor, you had, and I knew that you, Ben, I knew that you liked it, and Connor, I knew that you did not. And so, Ben is a big Spider-Man fan. I'm looking right now at his Skype icon, and it is a Spider-Man from is it PS4 game?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I don't know video games, so score for me. But yeah, so big Spider-Man fan here, which is why we asked you here to offer your expertise on the character and the lore.
Before we continue, where is our Twin Peaks connection?
Is there? Oh, okay. I was gonna say, is there one? I didn't notice it. Connor's gonna tan my hide for not noticing.
It's that very secret Willem Dafoe cameo in the last episode that you have to you use a magnifying glass to see.
Oh, I was thinking maybe Laura Dern was the voice of a Tony Stark robot or something. So Ben, why don't you tell us your thoughts, your feelings, and emotions on this movie?
If I do that, I know Connor's just going to shatter them down with his analytical hammer. But okay, so Spider-Man: No Way Home is my second favorite Spider-Man movie of all time. Spider-Man 2 will never be topped, fight me. And the main reason I like it is because I felt that out of all the other Spider-Man movies, I really felt like Tom Holland in this movie really came into his own compared to the other two movies. I thought it had a lot more. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of style compared to, say, like Logan or, non-Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, but it seems to have a bit more style to it than the previous two movies. And I think it has a good story. It has a good message. It has a really good understanding of Spider-Man's character overall, with him always trying to do the right thing, even if it seems like it's the wrong thing in the moment. He knows in the end it'll be the right thing. And maybe it's the fanboy in me. I can't deny it's pretty awesome seeing Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland together in the same movie. I can't pretend that that's not a big factor in why this movie's awesome.
Okay. And then Connor, please be gentle with him. Try not to shatter too hard.
Oh no.
Look,
no, bash the movie harder, Daddy.
I don't want to make anybody feel bad for liking this movie, and most people do. And that's not a diss on I think general audiences are stupid, right? That's not my tone. That's not what it is. This is.
I mean, you do think that. You just don't want to make it seem like you do at this point.
But like I think that like this movie connected in a way with a lot of people that it did not connect with me, and I kind of want. I've never in the last 6 months or so I haven't really understood why that is. Usually when there is a movie that's really popular that maybe I don't quite connect with, like I get why people like The Social Network, even though I don't. I get why people like Rocky 2 and I don't. Sorry, that is probably the hottest take I've had in some time. But Rocky 2 is not bad, everybody. I'm sorry. But when it comes to this, I'll ask people why they like it a lot. And I generally just kind of get like, well, it's fun. And, or it gave me what I wanted out of a Spider-Man movie. So I don't want to like paint this as like, I debate me, I need to know. But this is like my tone. I do want to just like right out of the gate say, I don't understand the appeal of this movie. And I don't like it. And I've watched it now multiple times. And I'm almost tempted to say I don't like it at all. I don't hate it, but I do kind of hate what it represents. I find it to be a supremely depressing movie in a lot of ways, and I don't know. I didn't really have like a statement. I have a ton of notes to like go into a lot of details, but I will just say, as somebody who my connection with Spider-Man has always been as a movie character. I understand that he comes from the comic books, and there's a lot of interpretations in video games and cartoons and TV shows. I know him as a movie character, and so I've always kind of liked him as a movie character. I like the first two Sam Raimi movies quite a bit. I think the third movie has some charm, and I didn't hate either of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and I didn't love them either. But I saw them once each in the movie theater and don't really remember much about them. And when it comes to the Tom Holland incarnation of the character, I was really invested in this story they were telling. And when it came to this film, the third one, Spider-Man No Way Home, I feel like they just realized they gave themselves a premise they didn't want and then said, we want to do something else. And what they decided to do instead, it's not what I wanted. It's that I thought they did a bad job at telling the story, because when I look at this movie and I'm thinking, what is it saying about Spider-Man? The only takeaway I can get from it is that Spider-Man exists, and in movies he's existed for 20 years, and I already knew that. So that's my takeaway.
Okay, anyways, we are really on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes, we are. I actually think. Oh, sorry, what's that?
So you're going all it's like, oh, I have notes, and I'm like, I'm just gonna be speaking from the heart, man.
Go for it. Yeah. When it comes, I'll just say, you said this is your second favorite Spider-Man movie. When it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think this is the worst film in that canon.
Jesus Christ. Thor: The Dark World, man.
Oh yeah, that's a real movie. Like, or it's a movie. It has intentions in telling some kind of story, even if it does so, I think, very badly. I will take being bored over being annoyed any day, and Thor: The Dark World is just kind of stupid and boring. But that's my thing.
With you especially saying, like, when I try to see what this movie says about Spider-Man, and you said like, oh, it just says Spider-Man's existed for 20 years. I'm just sitting there and I'm like, that is not what I saw in this movie at all. Like,
and that's cool. And I can't wait to get into it with you. But Comics Kid, how did you feel about Spider-Man No Way Home?
We got to fight. I'm going up to your house and I'm going to hit you with a boxing glove.
I should say I have been feeling an increasing lack of interest in the MCU since Endgame. After Endgame, I've talked about this a lot. After Endgame, I was really excited to see what came next, and then almost everything that has come since Endgame, I have just been so like, either I just hated it or I was just losing interest. Like when you get to a point where like you kick me so many times, and then like every once in a while you might like help me back up, like Eternals I thought was really good, and then you kick me again. Like I get to where it's like I just don't want to watch any more MCU. So like I was saying earlier, I have not seen Moon Knight. I have not watched Ms. Marvel. I watched the trailer for She-Hulk, and it looks to me like Sex and the City but set in the MCU. And Connor knows I hated my venture into Sex and the City. And so like I've just been losing interest in the MCU. It feels to me like post Endgame that they just don't really have a plan of what they're doing moving forward. That's what it seems to me overall. And
Can I give a slight counterpoint to that feeling?
Hey, let him finish his initial thoughts and then.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. You
okay, yeah. I'll hit you back up in a second, Ben. But basically, I feel like the MCU is just not really. It's not what I wanted. After Endgame, which had like literal end of the universe stakes, what I wanted was like an entire phase of let's go back to like phase 1 level stakes, where it's like, you're introducing characters and it can be like, here's a bad guy who might blow up like a building, but I didn't want end of the universe or higher stakes. And it feels like they are saying, well, now that we've had end of the universe stakes, we need to go even bigger. So what's bigger than that? Well, multiple universes. And I feel like when you're doing a franchise, you can, Connor, regular McDonald's, franchise guy. Sorry. And yeah. Sorry. But when you're doing a franchise, you don't have to do bigger with each installment. You can do different with each installment. I feel like, and so that's what I wish they had done. And so, and also since Loki. I really didn't care for the multiverse in general. Like sometimes I can see something that does something with the multiverse and I kind of like it. The movie Into the Spider-Verse. I didn't love that movie as much as everyone else. I liked it. I thought it was good. And that, to me, it used the multiverse as a tool, but it was really a story about Miles Morales coming into his own. It's a coming of age story that has the multiverse in it. But like just the whole multiverse as a concept lately, I've just been not feeling it. And so I have a feeling I'm just not going to want to watch Multiverse of Madness whenever it becomes available. And so like this was
You're not missing much.
Okay.
No, it's awesome. Multiverse of Madness slaps. Okay. Maybe we'll have another debate about that movie. Okay.
But this to me, I feel like I am just not the audience for it. I didn't take any notes. I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't have a burning hatred for it. I think probably I think I do feel more strongly about Thor: The Dark World if we're going to go to that.
My God, I'm getting flashbacks to when I was on Geeky Gentleman talking about The Perfect Host.
Oh,
and everybody else was like, "Oh my God, that movie sucks," and I'm like, "I like it."
No, I don't want this to be me and Connor ganging up on you, because a lot of times Connor and we will feel the same about a movie, but we'll feel it for different ways or different reasons. So hopefully we can, I'm going to try my level best to like say this didn't really work for me, but like Connor, if other people enjoy it, because several of my coworkers are really into the MCU and they like this movie. There was one day at work last week, somebody like, as soon as I got there, they're like, "Hey, I saw Doctor Strange." And I was thinking, like, I don't care. Why are you telling me this? So, like, I'm just not the audience for it. I think is where, and it like, because as soon as Far From Home came out, what I wanted for the sequel was Spider-Man is on the run and Kraven the Hunter is hired to hunt him down and catch him.
That's what I wanted to.
And so when they said, hey, we're going to do I think because for a long time, we didn't have a trailer for this movie. And like they waited a really long time to show a trailer. And that was kind of puzzling to me. But then they said, we're casting Alfred Molina and Jamie Foxx. And I thought, oh, are they doing a multiverse thing? Oh, okay. So yeah, I didn't really feel it, but I didn't feel strongly about it either. Ben, you were going to say something about me saying that they don't really have a plan.
Yeah, the thing is, I think it's very obvious. As someone who is very efficient in the comic books, I can tell you that they definitely have a plan, 100%. And I think the thing is, I think they are doing what you're saying you wanted them to do, but just with their more smaller characters. Because like I would argue that like really the only movies with like the big, like you're saying, multiverse stakes are like, or even end of universe stakes are Loki, No Way Home, and Doctor Strange. Like Shang-Chi, Black Widow, Moon Knight.
But Eternals also has like an end of the world plot to it, and that's like the last year.
Every MCU movie, even Phase 1 had an end of the world thing.
I mean, so but like this one is like the Earth is gonna hatch. You know what I mean?
Okay, then that's 5 out of, like I'm saying, most of the movies don't have stakes that are that huge. And I think they're using the bigger ones for like they're using a couple movies to really build up to the multiverse stuff because their end game, I think, is Secret Wars, which is a bunch of universes coming together into one big movie. But they're using smaller stakes for smaller characters. Like Moon Knight, for example, was just a bunch of people dying in the world. Black Widow was just an army of people going to attack the planet, even if it didn't make any sense. Shang-Chi was just like wasn't like a single village or something, and like wasn't that the stakes for Shang-Chi?
Well, they were going to release some like demon out of a hole, and it was going to like take over the world.
Yeah, but still, like it's typical comic book MCU Phase 1 stakes. So I think they are doing what you're saying of like starting over a little quieter, but not going like so far that they lose people. I think if they like didn't have multiverse at all and there's any hints of like, hey, we are building up to something, they think they'll lose the audience they got from stuff like Endgame. I'm not saying it's working completely because I'm also kind of losing my luster a little bit for the MCU. I adored Moon Knight, but Doctor Strange was whatever for me, and I don't really have too much interest in seeing Thor. I love this movie, but I do think that's why they're doing what they're doing with that. I do think they do have a plan, and they are building up to it slowly, just like not going completely back to basics, so they don't lose the audience they have. That's what I think, anyway.
That's fair, yeah. And also, I should say, like, even without without talking about the stakes, like a lot of the stuff has just, in my opinion, just not been very good. Like, I did not like. I was, I think, the only person on the planet who didn't like WandaVision. I didn't like Falcon Winter Soldier. I didn't like Loki. I didn't even watch What If. I liked the first 2/3 of Shang-Chi. I liked the Eternals more or less. See, I'm having trouble even remembering what all has come out. Black Widow. I didn't like Black Widow.
Hawkeye.
Yeah, so Hawkeye, I liked the chemistry between Clint and Kate, but I didn't really like any of the villains in that one. And so I feel like that, like, to me, they've had more misses than hits in the post-Endgame scape. So, and
they
that's
have had a lot of misses. I will agree with that. They have had a lot of misses.
And I think something that kind of compounds that is that in the span of 1 year, we got 9 projects, and most of them like that is more than that's like a phase and a half back in the day, right? It used to take us 6 years to get that many projects. And then when we get this much all at once and most of it you're not feeling, I think that probably contributes to a fatigue and just an overall lack of interest on top of that.
That is a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Ben, I don't know if I've ever asked you, what is your thoughts on Homecoming and Far From Home?
Okay. Homecoming, I like a lot. I do think it has, mainly, when I saw it in the theater, I absolutely loved it. Sorry. I forgot that we can't swear on this show.
Oh, that's fine. I'll do like the dolphin noises or something.
Either way, I love No Way Home, mainly because it gave me a lot of elements from like other Spider-Man franchises that I had wanted and never got. Like mainly when they had that scene of like Peter's like hiding under the table and he shoots the Spider Tracer on one of the guys.
Mm-hmm.
The Spider Tracer was such a big thing in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. I literally went like, oh my God, yes. Oh my God, Spider Tracers. Yeah, I liked it. Still wasn't my favorite. Like none of them are my favorite. Like I said, and then Far From Home, I have very mixed feelings on. Don't dislike it. I don't dislike any Spider-Man movie except for the Nicholas Hammond ones. Those are garbage. Even the fan films, even some of the Spider-Man fan films, I don't hate. But Far From Home is a weird case where that's a movie that feels like a completely different movie in a different franchise that they just took Peter's cast from Homecoming and kind of stuck them in there. It's like the tone's weird and like Nick Fury's there, but he's pretty pointless overall. And yeah, like the action's better than Homecoming, I'll give it that. But then like I get a weird feeling whenever I watch it, and it feels like a weird middle child to like Far From Home or No Way Home feels a lot more like a sequel to Homecoming than it does to Far From Home for me. Like the tone and the characterization feels a lot more in sync with those two movies than Far From Home does, because Far From Home feels like Peter all of a sudden turned into, instead of being like he's like a 17-year-old kid, he turned into a like 14-year-old whiny little brat, who all of a sudden is like, oh, I don't want to be like Spider-Man in Europe, and I just want to go to Europe and do this. And it feels more focused on like, let's put Spider-Man in all these weird different locations than telling a story to me. But Mysterio's great. Jake Gyllenhaal's a great villain, and I kind of like him more than Michael Keaton's Vulture.
Okay.
I'll agree with you there, Ben.
Whoa.
Mysterio is awesome. I really like Mysterio.
Well, I've always liked Mysterio more as a villain than the Vulture anyway, so.
Oh, kick me while I'm down. I loved Michael Keaton as the Vulture.
Me too.
We're not saying we dislike him. We just Mysterio more.
Okay. I loved Homecoming. I guess I should point out the MCU, because it's like 27 different movies and TV shows, or if we're counting TV shows, probably like closer to 40 different projects, like all kind of building on each other. So by its very nature, I don't return to it very often. So I probably only seen Homecoming maybe twice, and I think I've seen Far From Home twice, but I really liked Homecoming a lot. And then I liked Far From Home when it came out, and then when I rewatched it, I liked it a little less. I didn't watch either of them in preparation for this, but I think for me, like going back to the stakes thing, what I liked about Homecoming was it's going to be bad if a bunch of criminals get their hands on Chitauri technology, but it's not like the entire planet is going to be blown up bad. And so I was like, okay, this feels like a friendly neighborhood threat. And then Far From Home, it was like, well, now we have to escalate it. So now all of Paris is going to get blown up. And I was like, okay. And so that was, I guess for me, like, I would say I like Homecoming the best of these three, and Far From Home, I liked it when it came out, and it's one that I probably would like it less if I watched it again now.
Okay, and I guess to maybe recap my thoughts on it, the series so far, I think that Homecoming is lovely, very entertaining, just a really solid, I think fresh feeling movie that feels like a filmmaker who's excited to be there, and a cast that is excited to be there. It has this sort of, it paints a corner in the Marvel universe that I hadn't really considered before, and now it's like I can't imagine this world without that corner, and I can't wait to visit it again. And I have a little bit of mixed feelings on Far From Home, just in terms of like as far as that concept goes, where in the broader context of Spider-Man in general, it's like you have 5 movies in a row that all kind of feel similar in the sense that big city, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, love interest, big emotional stakes, and they're all kind of trying to go for a similar sort of feel. And what was neat about Far From Home is it's kind of nice that one of these, they can just like be on a summer vacation. You know what I mean? And what I like about that is that it starts off feeling kind of disposable and inconsequential, and then it grows into something more substantial. And I like how it plays into Peter maturing. I don't really like how he's basically, that movie says, be your own man, Peter. You need to be your own man, and apart from Tony Stark. Now use Tony Stark's machines to make a new costume. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, okay, come on, like that felt a little.
Actually, speaking of that costume, here's a hot take. I think his Far From Home costume looks not good at all. I don't like the black and red. Like the reason that it's costume. Yes, it was black. People are like, oh, but it was black and red in the Steve Ditko stuff. Yes, that was 3 years out of the 60-year history of this character.
Like, yeah, and
it's blue.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the Iron Spider costume is just all kinds of ugly, and it just won't go away. But when it comes to that, I was a little disappointed that it was sort of all about Peter once again learning he has to be his own man, but also you should follow the footsteps of Tony Stark. So when it comes to No Way Home, I guess to finally like really zero in on this.
We've been trying to talk about for like 20 minutes now.
So I guess let's get into it. Ben, I don't want to just sit here and just like say here's a list of grievances, address this please. I don't know. The dynamic here feels weird. How do you guys want to do this? Because like I don't want it to be like Ben, say something you like. Now I'll tell you why you're wrong. And I don't want that to be the case or anything, but we're obviously not really going to agree on much. But so how do we want to go about this?
I would, since I said I didn't like it, I want to say some of the things I did like. I think potentially.
Say something I didn't like.
Oh, okay. If you want to go ahead, and then I can. If you want to say what you didn't like.
Yeah, this is going to sound like a weird complaint, given the movie, and everyone talks about it, and I will say it does work really strongly in the movie. Aunt May dying, the way she does, I'm fine with it. It works well in the movie. But when they have that discussion with like the three Peters with Uncle Ben, even though Peter, like Andrew and Toby both mention Uncle Ben, Tom still doesn't, and it's getting a little frustrating to me at this point. Is Uncle Ben is that word like something that'll trigger a bomb in the MCU? Like, it's attached to like Tom Holland's vocal cord, so if he says it, the world explodes. Because like we know Uncle Ben exists because of like not only the briefcase, but What If, which is supposed to be a Spider-Man from a universe that's basically exactly the same, except for a zombie apocalypse. Uncle Ben's mentioned, and it's weird to me that even in a case where they're both like, "Hey, here's what happened to our Uncle Ben. This will help us connect with you," and he doesn't react to it. And the thing is with that, you wouldn't even have to do that. But even at the end of the movie, when he's at Aunt May's grave, you could have just put a gravestone next to hers that said Ben Parker. Mm-hmm. And they didn't even do that.
That's a good point. I didn't even. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's the thing where it's just like, I get you don't want to retread the ground of Uncle Ben, but at this point it's getting ridiculous.
And this would have been the time to do it. And I didn't even think about that, but because here's where my weird brain went when Tobey Maguire said, "With great power comes great responsibility." And then Tom Holland said, "Where did you hear that?" And then Andrew Garfield said, "Uncle Ben said it." And I wanted to say, "No, he didn't. Your Uncle Ben said, when your father, Richard Parker, had a saying, when you have the response," and I can't remember the quote, but all I know is
you want to talk about that. Actually, that's another weird issue I have with the movie. It's mainly with the Andrew Garfield stuff. There's a lot of weird, like, small things they say that are just wrong. Mm-hmm. Like the fact of like when they're like, all right, how are we going to cure them? And then Andrew goes like, "Oh, I've already cured Connors once, so no big deal." No, you didn't. Gwen did that. You didn't do anything. You didn't make the formula.
Well, and and when the whole conceit of the movie is we're bringing people who already know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man into this reality. And now I am a casual Spider fan, but I was thinking, wait a minute. I don't think the Sandman knew that Peter was Spider-Man, and I don't think that Electro knew.
Sandman did.
He did, though? Okay, that's right. You know what? Yeah.
At the end of Spider-Man 3, he sees he apologizes to Peter for killing his Uncle Ben. So
that's okay. Yeah. I had forgotten about that. But Electro, I was like, I don't think he knew. And then there was there's Tom Hardy. Spoilers. Tom Hardy shows up in a post-credit scene, and I was like, wait a minute, I just recently watched Let There Be Carnage a few months ago, and I'm like, he hasn't even met any Peter Parker of any kind. And so
to be fair to Tom Hardy, the post-credit scene does kind of hand-wave that away, where they say, like, oh, we have a knowledge, a hive mind that we can access through different universes.
Okay, yeah.
Basically says that since Topher Grace Venom knows, that means that he knows. Wouldn't it have been really funny if the sixth villain was Topher Grace as Venom?
That'd be great. But yeah, you're right about the like the Uncle Ben scene. That didn't even cross my mind when I was watching it, because I think Connor and I talked a little bit about the lack of Uncle Ben in Far From Home, like when he loses his briefcase and Aunt May is just like, it's fine. And we were both, or Connor, I think, may have been the one who said, like, well, that was probably Ben's briefcase. That's probably like one of your last like tokens of a reminder of him. And it's like, it's fine. So yeah, this, and I wonder if they just didn't put it in there for Tom Holland because it's like, well, we don't really know his Uncle Ben, so it'd be weird if he talked about him. But
no, I don't think that's the case. I'm gonna put on my tinfoil hat with a conspiracy theory. The fact that Uncle Ben, we will know this for sure if Uncle Ben is referenced in that freshman year cartoon coming out, which is supposed to be canon to the MCU. That the reason Uncle Ben isn't mentioned in these is for some weird legal thing, because he's mentioned in What If.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be a similar thing. And so it's some weird contract where they'll be like, okay, Sony and Marvel, here's our agreement. You can use Spider-Man in your Marvel movies, and we can use a Marvel hero in our movies. But you can't mention Uncle Ben, or I swear to God, like.
And that may be it. That would be weird, but that may be it. Connor,
it has to be. Like, it doesn't make any sense otherwise to me. But sorry, Connor, go ahead.
Did you have any thoughts on the Uncle Ben thing, Connor?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts. But
on the Uncle Ben thing.
Oh yeah, no. I don't even know where to begin. I have so many issues with this thing that and they're all like stacked on top of each other. It's like a dominoes thing that have already fallen, and it's like I gotta pick one out, but one's already leaning on top of it. You know what I mean? And
before you say that, I'm going to mention one other thing that is so inconsequential that it doesn't matter. I don't know where else I can bring this up. You guys know in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies that his webbing on his suit is raised, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
In this movie,
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, I mean, me neither.
I've seen the movie enough times, and his webbing, Andrew's webbing is raised. Tobey does not. Which I think the reason for that is because they used the same suit from Amazing Spider-Man 2 for Andrew, and with Tobey they had to make a new one, and they probably did it on the cheap.
Mm-hmm. Comics, you had mentioned that there was something you liked that you wanted to be sure to mention.
Yes. Well, it's more the idea of what could happen later on. I'm wondering if now that we have done this kind of venture between Sony and the MCU and Disney, if we're going to get like future Spider-Man movies with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, and if so, I kind of like the idea of what if we just had a Spider-Man who's in his 40s and like he's married to Mary Jane now, or and maybe he has a kid. He doesn't mention that in this movie, but like there was an ongoing series a few years ago where Peter and MJ. It wasn't the Spider-Girl series from the 90s.
Renew Your Vows.
Yes, Renew Your Vows. So like maybe they'll do something like that. And I think that'd be.
I have, but not to get into that, but the whole Tobey Maguire's vagueness is another thing where I'm like, that irks me a little bit, but we're not going to get into that. Continue your thoughts.
Okay, sorry. Well, I like the idea because like it's been so long since I was in high school when Spider-Man 3 came out, and it's been long enough that it would be interesting to me if we could revisit that world. And since Sony has joint rights with Disney, and Disney could keep doing Tom Holland stuff for 3 more movies if they want, and then Sony could do a Tobey Maguire movie or another Andrew Garfield movie. I think that'd be interesting to see. But honestly, I would probably be more interested in like a solo Andrew Garfield movie or a solo Tobey Maguire movie than I would like anything else going on in the MCU right now. Now,
to go with that point, I will say chances of Tobey Maguire coming back, I would say aren't super high. But I think if they got Sam Raimi back, he would do it. Chances of Andrew Garfield coming back, I think, are slim to none. I think the only reason he agreed to do this movie is because it's Marvel Studios, and Avi Arad had nothing to do with it. Because Sony burned him once. I don't think he wants to go through that again.
And he's getting nominations for, really, 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 really good movies. And his other movies were not very well received, and I think that might have maybe left an impression if I had to wager, I guess. Okay, let's structure this thing, all right? So let's just talk
structure in a podcast back. A pot.
I'll do what I can. Let's get into this. So we have the opening of this movie. It picks up directly where the last film left off, where
J. Jonah Jameson. We can't go through the whole movie. We'll be here for 5 hours. Jesus Christ. I'm kidding. Sorry. Continue.
All right, go ahead. What do you want to talk about?
No. I'm kidding. You go ahead.
Oh, okay. So what we got is J. Jonah Jameson reveals Spider-Man's identity to the world, and this is a nitpick, but it's a little, I think, weird that they cast J. Jonah Jameson as J.K. Simmons in this movie, which just kind of considering what we do with casting in this movie. It's kind of weird, but they made that casting choice, years ago before they decided they wanted to do this with the story. So my problem with this right off the bat is I find the introduction to all these characters, I don't like any of them right off the bat. And these are characters that I have liked in previous movies. I think Aunt May is like objectively horrible in this movie. Like she's like a bad person, and I don't like her. She was only been a gag up until this point, and now that they've finally given her a chance to do something, she's just kind of a bad person. I don't like her. I can maybe get into the specifics later. But then we have Ned is basically just, hey, what did I say in the other movies? People remember guy in the chair, guy, chair. I'm the guy in the chair. Guy in the chair, that's me. Hey, look at me. I'm the guy in the chair. Do you remember when I said that in the other movie? That's all I do now. And then Zendaya, like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm kind of picking up speed. Zendaya's Mary Jane is frustrating to me because what I found kind of like what I was able to forgive Homecoming and Far From Home with her is that Peter is crushing hard on her in the second movie, and she's just kind of this side character in the first one. And she's a teenage girl; she's not a fully formed person yet, and maybe she's like awkward and kind of has like this kind of sort of counterculture edge to her that seems to be sort of like her projecting like an image of herself where she's not really fully formed yet, and that's totally cool. And especially when you're crushing on somebody, you tend to fall in love with the idea of them more than the actual who they are. My issue with the relationship between Peter and MJ in this movie is that it seems like they're in the middle, or they've been having this very profound relationship with one another where they really connect, and we just skipped all of that because this movie's not interested in that. It's only interested in that insofar as what it can do for the plot. You have Tom Holland playing scenes with them where MJ will like kind of speak for Peter, and because Peter is incapable of speaking coherently in these movies, she basically acts as his interpreter to adults, and then he kind of looks at her with this like oh, she understands me. Like there's like the sense of belonging he feels with her, and I don't get what they've been through that makes him feel that way. I don't get really what she sees in him because he's like just kind of says that he likes her. It's Attack of the Clones is much worse, obviously, but it's the same kind of problem I have with films like Attack of the Clones, where just because these two characters are saying they're in love all the time, that doesn't actually make me believe that they are. So I don't know. Right off the bat, I don't really like anybody in this movie, and that kind of comes from the opening stretch. So I don't know. How are you guys with characterization?
I will say I don't agree at all with the romance side of it. I agree with Ned to a point. I do think he's been flanderized a little bit. However, I will say that I do think that I can see the romance more between the two of them, especially, given the fact that a lot of my colleagues at my job are teenagers and some of them are dating each other. I can sort of see connections that are similar to a lot of them at like a lot of these people at my work. Not to mention, a lot of it, I think, is just in subtext where we're not told exactly we're not told why Michelle. That's irritating too. You should have just made her Mary Jane in the first place. But the reason Michelle likes Peter, from what I can see in these movies, is the fact that she found out he was Spider-Man, or suspected by last movie, and I think at first she liked him because of him being more of a nerd and less of a jock and more of a less of a typical typical guy, and then finding out he's Spider-Man, kind of similar to like how they attempted to do it and failed with the Kirsten Dunst and Mary Jane and the Maguire movies. Him being Spider-Man made her love him more because it was a thing of like, oh, this is something that draws me to you because it's showing the kind of person you are, that you're always willing to, you're willing to go out there and help people instead of just always thinking out for yourself, which she, from what we can see, sees a lot of with like, Flash and Homecoming always being like, oh, I've saved my trophy. I don't care about you people. Like that's, I guess, what I got from it anyway.
Okay.
And
being very quiet.
I'm listening. So.
I would say, did you have any more on that, Ben?
No, I don't. That's the best I can say it.
I would say the relationship thing kind of has its roots in Far From Home also, because in Homecoming, like Michelle was there and she kind of interacted with them a little bit, but she, like you said, she was a side character. And then suddenly in Far From Home, she like Peter's like, I really, really, really want to ask out Michelle. Like the whole summer that's all I want to do this summer is just ask her out and go on a date with her. And you could say like, well, where did this come from? Like he didn't really like, it's not that he didn't care about her, but he didn't see her that way in Homecoming. And then suddenly she is like all he can think about in Far From Home. And like Ben said, they're teenagers. And with this movie, it starts off at the end of summer, and then over the course of the movie, by the end of it, it's Christmas time. And like at one point, it's before the plot really kicks in, when they're at the coffee shop and Michelle's boss says, take down the Halloween decorations. So like a few months passes in this movie. And so like, I kind of am willing to give it a little bit of a pass on the relationship stuff because some time has passed that we are not seeing. Like there was time in between Homecoming and Far From Home where Peter developed a crush on her. And then there's time in between scenes in this movie where there's weeks where they're probably spending time with each other and developing as people and growing closer to each other. And I would love to see that more. I think like the thing I really loved about the first Amazing Spider-Man movie was the chemistry between Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield. I felt like that was some of the strongest relationship stuff that I have seen in a comic book movie. Because a lot of times, especially like like Avengers, when you'd have like a superhero movie and a love interest, it never felt to me like the love interest stuff was ever really handled very, like it always just felt like it was kind of pushed to the side so that the plot stuff could be put forward. And so I feel like this kind of reminds me of that, like early to mid 2000s superhero movies where the plot stuff is at the forefront and we're expected to just kind of accept that the relationship stuff is developing off screen.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Cause like the plot here, I just have a lot of issues with the film premise-wise. I don't like what we do with the cliffhanger from the last movie, and then I don't like the premise that this film establishes. So what we have is the movie saying, we want to make a live-action Spider-Verse movie because our animated Spider-Verse movie won an Oscar. So crap, we're kind of stuck with this cliffhanger where people find out who he is, and I got an idea. Let's just throw Charlie Cox into the mix so people will like clap in the theater and they'll not realize that the movie is gear shifting so hard into a different premise that, the Charlie Cox will prevent noticeable whiplash. That's where I get from it, because it is Charlie Cox shows up to just say, oh yeah, they got no case on you. It was just a meme. Lol. Anyways, I'm Charlie Cox. Oh my God. Everyone claps. So I don't like that. And then what the premise we do get is, so like, I guess I'll say when it came to the trailer, it does kind of present a little bit of what we got here, that I do like. I understand where this comes from as a continuation, which is I'm sad or I'm upset. Like people, my secret identity getting out ruined my life, basically. Doctor Strange, can we undo this? Can we magic our way out of it? Hey, that's a good idea. It's a way of kind of drawing connections between, the wider MCU. If you also live in New York, it would make sense that, a teenager wants to find an easy way out, goes to try to get magic to solve it. Totally works. I was kind of on board with that first trailer, kind of when it was presenting that. My issue is that the premise we have bothers me, because the reason why Peter wants his identity, or like wants Doctor Strange to make everyone forget, it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with how his identity got outed. There's like a couple of degrees of separation here. It does seem to be like we have Peter sitting on top of the school, and he goes, man, doesn't it suck that my identity got outed? Anyways, the premise of this movie we actually want to do is let's get into MIT, everybody. And then like you can feel that scene shift over. And then I'll put it this way. If you just had it be, I'm Peter Parker and I took off my mask, and then an apartment complex saw me take off my mask and someone took a picture, or, there's a rumor going around that I'm Spider-Man. or maybe a classmate probably saw it and then outed me or something. And now there's a rumor that I'm Spider-Man. Oh man, I really wish this didn't happen. Hey, Doctor Strange, can you make everyone forget that I did? No, you know what I mean? Like, it feels like the way we get here feels very arbitrary, and it feels like they're just trying to, like, the setup could have been anything, and making that the cliffhanger of your second movie, it feels like it's dealt with in a very arbitrary way that I found disappointing.
I had some points of what you said.
Okay.
Mainly the Charlie Cox and lawyer element. I don't think it's as hand wavy and like gear shifting as you think it is, just because we're not getting the murder element, like all the murder element of it. It's still a thing of what happened is still very much affecting the plot, in the sense of, I think it's a case that if Peter's identity would have been outed but not framed for murder, he might have had more of a chance to get into MIT. But because even if he was proven innocent, there's still that controversy that's stopping him from doing that. And then a bit more of a smaller point, Charlie Cox thing, is that part of the fun of the Marvel Comics was that if anyone ever needed a lawyer, they'd always get Matt Murdock, because he was the superhero. And hey, you can have fun with, like, the superhero lawyer thing, which, fair, they don't take full advantage of that here. But it's still a thing of, if you're going to have Peter need a lawyer for something, even if it is just to be like, hey, this part of the charges are gone, and you're in the MCU, why wouldn't you have fun with it and do something like have Charlie Cox, or if it had come out later, maybe She-Hulk?
Well,
like, that's part of the fun of it being in the MCU, is that they're connected. You can do stuff like that.
I have no issue with a Daredevil cameo and concept. I don't like that it's just slapped on to distract you from what the movie's actually doing, which is to just, as quickly as possible, pivot into the story that they actually want to tell. Because I guess they realized they didn't want to tell the story that they left themselves off with. Anyways, where do you fall in that, Comics Kid?
I feel like maybe, Ben, you might know more about this, or even Connor, because I don't really keep up with a lot of like behind the scenes stuff. Because I know, was it after Far From Home where Sony was threatening to take Spider-Man away from Disney? And so
it
like
was, yes.
Okay. And so like I think Tom Holland kind of said, you like, sit down in a chair, let's talk about your relationship, like him with May and Happy. And so like and then I think this story came out because of the negotiations. I feel like the deal was, okay, we'll let Disney keep doing Spider-Man stuff, but we're gonna want to do a whatever, with here, like they may have had more of a say in this. So I'm wondering if, like, John, and I'm sure John Watts hasn't said anything, but I'm wondering if this was kind of the story that was given to him, and he wasn't given the chance to do a third story that he would have wanted to have done.
I don't think that's the case, mainly because, in the sense of, we have seen, there is some reports of what was going on. And back when Marvel and Sony were, fighting, there was a point where Sony was just going to be like, screw it, we're going to make a Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland, and it's going to be without Marvel, and we're going to do the Kraven thing. We're going to do the Kraven story. And they went to John Watts, and they're like, hey, you want to direct it? And he's like, if it's not in the MCU, no.
Okay. Huh.
So although, we have heard that apparently the multiverse stuff was originally planned to be a post-credit scene for the Kraven stuff, and then Feige said, let's do that for this movie. So I do agree it is a bit of a pivot, in the sense of, like, this definitely was not what they intended originally at all. Like, definitely not. It was definitely more leading towards Kraven. But I do think that I think it masks that shift better than Connor does personally, because the issue with the multiverse is still, you couldn't have what happens in this movie happen without Far From Home.
Mm-hmm.
Like, unlike a lot of other, like, movies that would attempt this sort of, like, fan servicey multiverse kind of thing. Like the events of Far From Home have to happen the way they do in order for this movie to happen.
Right.
As opposed to, like you couldn't just skip Far From Home, even though my girlfriend Rachel skipped it. She didn't see Far From Home before seeing this movie.
Well, I guess that's what my issue is I feel like you absolutely can. the setup of his identity being outed in the way it is feels very arbitrary to me. But I've already gone into that.
Since we're on, you go ahead.
Actually, one thing I wanted, with you mentioning the Marvel Sony thing, there's something I wanted to make sure I mentioned this, because I've tried to talk about it and no one's really heard me say it, and I want it to be heard on the World Wide Web. I would say this is a movie that is actually, like, whether you like it or not, it's kind of amazing that this movie got made, because without the Sony Marvel deal, you could not do this movie in the same way. Like for an example, say if Disney got the rights to Spider-Man full on, you could, do a multiverse story. You couldn't have Alfred Molina, you couldn't have Green Goblin, you couldn't have Willem Dafoe, couldn't have Andrew Garfield, Tim Maguire. Like, you couldn't have any previous characters from these previous movies in it at all. And then if Sony did it on their own, you couldn't have Doctor Strange, you couldn't have Happy Hogan, like, couldn't have any references to Tony Stark. It's very much a case of, I would put it in a similar, like, not exactly like Roger Rabbit, but in the sense of, like, this is a movie that only could exist with this specific scenario, and it's kind of insane that it does for that reason.
Yeah. And whenever the arguments were going on, I remember thinking, like, worst case scenario, if Sony gets the rights back, like, I was thinking maybe it'll be okay. Now I don't know, because, like, I don't think either of the Venom movies are very good, and I haven't seen Morbius. I've heard people say that it feels like an early 2000s movie. I don't know if Sony
I'm just saying it feels like that movie sold 1 trillion tickets, so I don't know why you haven't seen it yet.
It sold
it's Morbin time, baby.
But, like, you're right. Like, this movie is a collaboration between the companies, and, like, that's something that you're good on you for mentioning Roger Rabbit, because, like, that's a movie where who were the characters? Was it Donald Duck and Daffy Duck, who were both in the same scene together, and they had, like, the same amount of screen time, and, like, they were, that's something you just don't see a lot in movies. And so it is interesting, especially if you're aware of, like, oh, this is a character from that company and this one's from over here. So yeah.
It's just kind of a weird, interesting fun fact to me, because could you imagine if if Sony would have had this movie, then Madam Web would have been the thing trying to whip everyone's mind. Everyone would be asking, who the hell is Madam Web?
Yeah.
So, well, I think talking about the business ties into another one of my points. When I'm looking at this movie, like, I don't want to be the cynical guy or whatever, but I will be for this discussion. When I'm looking at this movie, I can't not see the business mechanics turning their gears. Because, like, this is what it feels like to me. Like, okay, we got Spider-Man. We don't know how much longer we have this collaboration with Disney going on for. So, we have what was the biggest superhero movie ever? That was Avengers Endgame. All right, let's do our market research for Avengers Endgame. All right, it had a lot of moments that made people cheer. All right, let's have as many moments. Like, we're gonna make Spider-Man Endgame. Now let's see how many moments that we can have to make people cheer. Let's all brainstorm, come up with ideas for that. How can we come up with a plot to facilitate as many of those as possible? And in a lot of ways, it does feel like, how do we get from this cheer-worthy moment to this other cheer-worthy moment? Oh, it doesn't matter. Just get us there. People won't care as long as they're cheering. And that's like, that's all I see here. It's like when it comes to this being a multiverse story, it's not like 5 Spider-Mans all come through, and one of them is in his, like, mid-50s and he's like a big jerk and he's played by Jason Lee, right? No, it's just the 2 live action Spider-Mans that we've gotten. And, like, that whole scene where we get them is, like, it hurts my brain. I gotta break down that in a minute, or probably in a lot longer than a minute. But, like, when it comes to this, it is just like, we need to make people remember the 20 years of Spider-Man that we have, and just sort of, I don't know, like, people call this a celebration, and I guess I don't really know what else to call it. The problem is I don't know what exactly it's celebrating and how exactly it is celebrating. Like I said, it just seems to be like, we're all Spider-Man and we all exist. The end. Now you're Spider-Man, Tom Holland. I don't know. So when we get to the basic setup of my problem here is I don't feel like a story's being told here. There's just like a plot, and I feel like it's a very poorly structured plot at that. It kind of gets into these stretches where the only thing motivating Peter is not any belief or decision that he has to make. He's just doing what other people are telling him to do, and then he's just like, okay, so why does he want to go wrangle up these villains? Well, because Doctor Strange told him to. Now he wants to rehabilitate them. Why is that? Well, because Aunt May told him to, and Dr. Octopus made some puppy dog eyes, all right? You wouldn't want to put that guy down, would you? And then at the end, he decides not to kill the Green Goblin. Why? Well, because Tobey Maguire told him not to. And so it's just like, I don't, this Peter Parker doesn't believe anything. And he, like, every, like, chance he finally gets to make a decision, someone has to, like, tell him what to do. And he goes, oh, well, I'm such a nice guy. Okay. I don't know what this Peter stands for. I don't get
You're
it.
kind of ignoring the biggest decision he makes in the movie with the, like, him telling Doctor Strange to wipe everyone's memory of him. That was not something he was told to. That was his decision 100%.
Yeah. Okay. I would say I think I halfway agree with Connor, because I do think that a lot of this movie is Peter not having agency, but I would say that because Far From Home, that whole movie was supposed to be about, like, you need to be your own man and you don't need to try to be the next Tony Stark, regardless of how it handled that, and that was like seconds before this movie. And so Peter is still very much like we've said already, he's a teenager, and so I'm willing to give it a little bit of a pass for Peter being kind of like a leaf in the wind, and like, everybody, you do this, and he says okay, because he's still like he's just graduated high school, and so he's like, I guess I mean, because, like, well, no, so was Far From Home, was that in between his junior and senior years of high school?
Yes, it was, because he has his GED book at the end, so he
right. I saw, yeah, okay. So he's still, not even out of high school yet, and so, like, it feels like this is like the origin movie for, like, and starting now, he is going to be his own man. But it also kind of reminds me of the 2009 Star Trek movie. I don't know if you've seen that, Ben. The
movie's my main exposure to Star Trek.
Okay, so, like, the end of that movie, they're like, well, we're going to boldly go where no man has gone before. And even though I didn't really care for that movie, I thought, well, okay, this has opened the door for us to have some new Star Trek adventures, some new, keyword new. And then the next movie is like, what if we did Wrath of Khan again, but worse? And so, like, on the one hand, like,
and that movie also ends with, well, we actually didn't go on a 5-year mission, but now we're going on the 5-year mission.
Yeah. And so with this movie, I feel like at the end where he's in the apartment and he's like, and he puts on the costume, and, like, I like that bit at the end where he puts on the costume. But I was thinking, like, you're telling us that this is going to be the beginning of him as his own man. He doesn't have Aunt May as a safety net anymore. He doesn't have the guy in a chair. He is just going to be Spider-Man. But this is also the third movie the third solo Spider-Man movie. And he's also been in Avengers movies. And so, like, it feels to me like it shouldn't have taken them this long to get Tom Holland to get this this Spider-Man to that point,
Yeah, well, so I guess I'll just, I never finished my earlier point. Sorry, you know what? Never mind. What were you going to say, Ben?
So with the decision thing, I don't agree with that up to a point. I think that at the start of the movie, you're right in the sense about people are kind of telling him what to do. But I do think that when we get to Maguire and Garfield popping in the movie, I do think that is a point when Peter is starting to make his own decisions for this whole thing, because it's still a case of, yeah, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are telling him, don't kill them, but he still has the box. He could still send everybody back if he wanted to, but he chooses not to. And I think the big thing with that, 1 second, is that he made a thing said by the Green Goblin in the movie earlier on is the fact that he says, I see, this is gonna be my terrible Willem Dafoe impressions. I see you struggling to have everything you want while the world tries to make you choose. And in the end, he does choose. he has to choose between he tries to have both and he can't. And in the end, he makes a decision of, I'm not going to be Peter Parker. My focus is going to be on being Spider-Man, because he gives up everything that makes him happy as Spider-Man. And that's what he does. He does the right thing by doing that, which is a big thing of what Spider-Man is. If one side wins, the other side loses. And when Maguire and Garfield come to him, he learns that lesson, that he's going to have to pick which side of him comes out in the end. And he does that by saving the villains and wiping everyone's memory.
Okay. I have a question. Why does he choose to have Doctor Strange cast the spell?
The first time or the second time?
No. Like at the end, like you were saying, like he makes the he does make a choice at the end to like have Doctor Strange. He tells Doctor Strange to do the spell.
Because the thing is, it'll fix the problem.
Oh, but what is the problem? What is the problem?
That the multiverse is being destroyed.
Oh, okay. So everything is going to get destroyed. I don't see that as a choice, though. That's like, oh my God, a neutron bomb is going to kill everybody. You know what? Actually, I'm going to make a choice to be selfless. It's like, I don't know.
It's still a choice in the sense of Doctor Strange does make it seem like that's not the only spell that would work. And in fact, if they just cast the spell how it was originally of have people forget that I'm Spider-Man, that probably would work also. But he still makes that decision because he realizes that it's better for his loved ones if they don't have that connection to him, because all it's done is put their lives in danger.
Yeah, I feel like by the end, I do feel like he is his own man, making his own choices. So I will say, like, by the end, I'm feeling it. Now, it could be that when we get Spider-Man 4, that he'll be back to, like, not, that this is promising something we're not going to get. It could be like that. I don't know. But at the end of the movie, I do feel like he's in, even after he asks Doctor Strange to cast a spell, like, he says, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell Michelle who I am, and I'm going to tell Ned who I am. And then he realizes, like, he sees the Band-Aid and it's like, oh, this is what she's in, like Ben was saying, she's in danger if she knows who I am and just being near me. And so he makes the choice to put the notes, the note that he wrote back in his pocket. And so I feel like he is making choices, but I will also say, like, I feel like it's kind of like this being his third movie, and then also he was in 2 or 3 Avengers movies, it feels like he should have been after 6 or 7 movies, that he should have been at that point earlier, I would say.
Oh, I agree with that completely. I do agree. I do just think, though, that I just don't agree with what Connor's saying, and that he never makes his own decision or doesn't stand for anything. He does. It's just that it doesn't. It's in the latter half that he does, and in the beginning, he's still kind of the, like, hey, I'm still just a kid, and I'm going to listen to what the adults are saying, kind of a thing. But
I don't know, man. Like, it's like if he's like, and I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I definitely see how you're arriving at your point. But like when I see him like making a decision, it's my decision is to murder the Green Goblin, and then Peter Maguire says nope, and then he says, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. You know what I mean? It's like I don't like, for all intents and purposes, this Peter Parker's a murderer. Like, he actually is what J. Jonah Jameson accuses him of being.
Maguire was too, and
that's completely beside the point. Doesn't matter. I'm talking about this one. So like I don't like I don't know. Like, I'm trying to articulate this in a way that's like I don't know. This is sorry. I don't care that what Tobey Maguire did in his own movie. I'm talking about this movie. And in this movie,
I was using it to reinforce the point with this Spider-Man, but like
okay, go for it.
It's a case of it's all in the performance with Maguire, in that, like, yes, it is him going like, no, don't do that, but it is also, I think, a case of Peter still learning. Is a big thing that Maguire says to him earlier is, we got to cure all of them. It's what we do. Even though, curing people is not what Spider-Man can. He's not a doctor. But it's a case that he says, we got to cure all of them. It's what we do. And the look that Maguire gives him when he stops the glider is a face of, you're better than this. You don't need to do this. You know it's not the right thing to do. And it's Peter going, you're right, it's not. I'm going to stop now, because it's not just a case of, like, he is still making a choice, like, because he is still pretty strong. He probably could still, like, kick Maguire's legs out from under him and then go stab on the Goblin. But just because
I just don't know what's motivating him to not murder the Green Goblin.
Because he knows with great power comes great responsibility, and using his power in that way is not the responsible thing to do. The responsible
sure,
thing
but I don't understand how this Peter internalizes that lesson. That's what I come at it from. Like, for example, when it comes to like the original Spider-Man, the movie that a lot of people will say the screenplay is the weakest aspect of, you get, I think, some pretty efficient storytelling, like in terms of establishing who Peter Parker Spider-Man is in that movie, right? You have you have him being complacent, right, where he lets the burglar go, and the consequence is immediate, right? Like, Uncle Ben dies. That's the result of him being negligent, right? It's like, and then when you get to, he immediately responds to this by tracking down that guy, and then as a result of his direct action, that person dies, and he realizes, what happens when he uses his power too much, right? Boom, right there. You understand the two ends of what he can do. He can be selfish in both ways, selfish in a negligent sense and selfish in a like an authoritarian sense, right? And he needs to you immediately understand the boundaries with which he needs to operate in. And then you have the Green Goblin, who shows up, and he is kind of operating in that, like, authoritarian power sense of just take whatever you want, right? All of this is very firmly established, and I understand that this movie is, I think, trying to I guess define who Peter is in this universe. The problem I have is I feel like the other movies already did, and then the Peter we get in this movie is acting somewhat counter to the man he said he was going to be in the previous film, Far From Home.
Okay.
I don't personally agree with that, but I can't really think of anything to fully, like, negate that part of the argument or to counter it. So I will, like, let that stand.
I'm not trying to like debate and say, like, you're objectively wrong, right? I'm just saying, like, this is what I'm getting from that. So, like, in the last movie, it was like, I make this suit, you gotta stop the bad guy from doing a bad thing. It's been a minute since I've seen Far From Home, but, like, he feels responsible because he let Mysterio have those glasses, and he knows how to stop him, and he goes over and stops him, I guess. But in this movie, like, it's frustrating because this is reframing everything as an origin. You have Peter, like, I don't understand what was motivating him before, and now in this movie it seems like who he's deciding to be, he's branching. It feels like the branch is like a different branch than, like, the character I was following beforehand. That's what it feels like to me, because when it's with great power comes great responsibility. This time, I really wish I was more articulate today and I didn't have to work this morning. But long story short, I think that when it comes to a lot of the stuff happening around him isn't even his fault. Like, Aunt May is responsible for her own death because she's a bad person for letting all these supervillains into Happy's apartment, and also giving Peter a guilt trip for wanting to send them all back. That's her own fault. Like, Peter had nothing to do with that. And I don't know, like, what are you guys at? I feel like I'm kind of, like, throwing ideas around, and what are you guys thinking?
Ben, you go first.
Unfortunately, my side of things glitched out a little bit. I heard maybe half of that.
Oh, no.
So I apologize. But with the Aunt May as a bad person thing, I'm not going to say you're completely wrong in the sense of her being a little, I'd say, negligent with things. But I'm not going to call her a bad person, because it is still a thing of Peter in this movie is very much a case of him going a little backwards because of what happened, where his identity is out, and he's being very selfish, even though he thinks he's being selfless, like with the whole Doctor Strange spell thing. Like that was the thing with the spells. He's all like, "Oh, I just want my friends and me to be able to go, or my friends to be able to go to MIT." He's being insanely irresponsible and insanely selfish with that because he must know that doing that is insanely reckless and stupid to like try to use a spell to wipe people's memories of a thing or even time travel like he originally thought. But to get to the original point, I think with Marissa Tomei as Aunt May and her whole thing with it, she's always kind of been it's very clear from Homecoming and Far From Home that she's trying her best at being a mom, but it's not something she's super good at. Like it's not like the I would say, even though there's that whole scene with Sally Field in Amazing Spider-Man 2 where she's all like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just your non-scientific aunt." She does her best and knows what she's doing to raise Peter properly, and so did Rosemary Harris Aunt May. Whereas Aunt May in this movie in these movies is still very much like, hey, if Richard and Mary Parker hadn't died, then she would have been like, "Hey, I'm the cool aunt who lets you smoke weed in the basement, Peter." Like, yeah, like, and I think she's trying to teach him the right lessons, which in this case is don't send these people who clearly need help to get themselves killed. But she's doing it in the wrong way because she doesn't fully understand herself.
Yeah. Sorry, continue.
Which I don't think makes her a bad person. I will say her getting killed is still her fault, but it's still a thing that it uses her. But it's her way of teaching Peter. Because even though Peter should know already, with great power comes great responsibility, but he should know that already. But for the sake of argument, we'll say he doesn't because even though he does, because he says "I know" when she says that to him, so it's confusing. But I think it's a case of, like I said, just because someone makes a choice that seems wrong and like bad from the outside perspective doesn't mean they're necessarily a bad person. It just means that they just made the wrong choice. And I think that is the case with Aunt May in this movie, in that she's trying her best. Her best is just not great because she doesn't know how to be a parent.
Yeah. Go ahead, Connor.
No. You've been very quiet, Comics.
Okay. I'm not sure how I feel about the whole Aunt May thing because like Peter says it's not our problem, and so I think the way he says that.
I missed the part where that's my problem. You should have.
I feel like he's coming off a little immature right there, and again, like he's just finished, he's not even he's a senior in high school, so it's hard for me sometimes to remember how much of an idiot I was when I was a senior in high school, and how I thought I was just awesome and I knew everything, but like he says, we just need to get them back, and she says, well, first we need to help them, and I guess I'm a little confused on like we don't know how the magic works. If Doctor Strange pushes the button, does it send Octavius right back to the very millisecond that he was taken from, where he's like falling in the water and there's the sun thing is like under the bridge, and does it send him right back to that exact same second that he was plucked from in in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2? Because if that's the case, then no matter what Tom Holland and Marissa Tomei do, it's not going to matter because these guys are all going to die anyway. Because you pluck them, or you know what I'm saying? Like
don't. Well, the magic is a little confused because going with where they're placed, where they're located, they do mention where they are. Some of them.
Yeah.
Doc Ock mentioned. He mentions, to be fair, he mentioned that he had Spider-Man by the throat. This was just before Toby got through to him and got him to break through the inhibitor chip or through the AI. That was just before that. And then, Electro's the biggest problem because he's like, I was getting electrocuted. And it's like, well, he's just gonna get killed when he gets back.
Right.
But with some other ones, I would argue, for example, Willem Dafoe. That's why people have had the argument, which still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it makes more sense than like when they're about to get killed. That each character is plucked from when they find out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and it wouldn't explain why. Well, because it makes more sense that way, because if it was right before they would die, Willem Dafoe wouldn't have the Goblin mask or the glider when he got to the MCU, and yeah, and then it matches with Ock's whole thing, because that is when he found out that Peter was Spider-Man, was when he had him by the throat before the thing collided. And I think it's a case of, with like you're saying, like, oh, he'll die anyway. I think it's kind of an example of, like, say for example with Alfred Molina in Spider-Man 2. He comes back, he has a new inhibitor chip. He also still has the arc reactor that he took from that scene. So I think it's a case of, it's not something we're supposed to fully think about, which fair, like, that's something we can still question, because they are kind of going like, I don't think about it. But I think we're just supposed to kind of assume that everybody does get out of it okay, especially in the sense of, like, let's say if Doc Ock goes back, he has an arc reactor and he's with Toby, and he can be like, okay, we have at least a minute or two. Let's try to figure out a different plan than me drowning myself to get rid of this thing, especially now that we have this super powerful, cool new piece of technology. And then, like I said, with Norman Osborn, he was clearly taken before he got killed, so he would just be in a world where I think it's more interesting in the sense of, like, if each of these characters are sent back to their alternate, to like where they would have been before, then each, like, the Tobey Maguire universe now has like 4 separate timelines.
Yeah, because it's Octavius, Green Goblin, and Sandman are from that one, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Or 5 if you count, like, Toby from this movie, and
coming back. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the Magic comics, kid, because that's something I've been wanting to get to for some time. I don't like the way they set up the multiversal element of this. It's different than What If, but that's fine. What If didn't even follow What If. It's different than Loki, because Loki contradicted its own rules 8 different times. Like,
I don't think it completely contradicts.
Oh, just let me finish.
Okay, sorry.
Anyways, so when it comes to, like, the magic here, first of all, I don't like how out of character Doctor Strange is. That he was willing to just, like, because I feel like this movie's just operating on puppy dog eye logic. Like, oh, doggone it, that Peter Parker, I told him no, and he got all, like, bashful, and I feel, look at who can say no to that face? All right, kid, let's go do some magic in the basement. And then he gets all upset that Peter is a dumb kid. Like, I feel like Doctor Strange should be like, look, kid, I'm a doctor, like, so I give people the rules. Like, this is all of the things that's going to happen with this spell. Go home, think it over. We can all forget tomorrow. This is what will happen if we do the spell. That doesn't happen. They kind of do it really quickly. And then within, like, the span of an hour, Peter leaves, fights Dr. Octopus, comes back to Doctor Strange's, like, underground CW private prison, and they end up, like, talking. Like, then Doctor Strange is like, okay, here's the setup, kid. You brought, because you can't stop talking during my spell. Like, you gotta, like, we got supernatural visitors, and the thing he says is, I got the line written down. He says, after you left, I detected an otherworldly presence. I pursued it into the sewers, and I found that slimy green son of a gun, referring to the lizard. And then he says, all right, kid, you need to go hunt down and catch villains from other movies. And I'm like, all right, cool. That's the premise of the movie. And then Doctor Strange is like, and I got to go find out basically what I got to figure out a way to deal with them while you're doing that. Okay, got the premise. This is cool. Doctor Strange, what did you mean by otherworldly presence? How did you detect that? Maybe give Peter a leg up on that. He just says, go look on TikTok to see if you can find any Green Goblins, and I'll be back. So then they go and get, Ned and Mary Jane to help out, and then and then they go off to, find Electro and Sandman and whatnot. But then we eventually do get Doctor Strange showing back up, and he's like, all right, it took me an entire day to do it, but I found this box, and I put the spell inside the box, and I just got to do this ritual, and then push, and then they'll all go home. And I'm thinking, all right, Doctor Strange, why did we waste all this time rounding up these villains? So basically what we have is I have the spell, it's in a box, and I just push the button and it sends everyone back. They don't need to be in my private underground prison from the CW. They don't need to be, they can be, I guess it's just assume everywhere on Earth, I press the button, everyone goes back to where they came from. I don't know exactly what point we're putting them back in, if they're being put back exactly where they were taken away from, or if it's at another point, don't know, but I'll just push this button. Doctor Strange, you've been really irritated and annoyed this whole time. Why did you even go through the formality of coming back to do the ritual? You know what I mean? Just they should have been talking in in the underground prison, and they should have all just disappeared. And then Doctor Strange showed up and said, "All right, thank you, bye-bye." Also, why did Doctor Strange even bother wrangling up Spider-Man to do all this? If he just needed to find an ancient relic to send them all back, just do that. I don't know. After you found the lizard and he came back from an otherworldly presence, I don't know. Then what's frustrating to me is that they just strangle, or they wrangle Doctor Strange up and leave him in the mirror dimension. And it just felt to me like, okay, we're only interested in Doctor Strange insofar as he can establish the problem we have to deal with. Okay, thank you for showing up, Doctor Strange. We'll leave you in the mirror dimension. Oh, shoot, it's the end of the movie. How do we resolve all this? I will just bring Doctor Strange back. So then they just bring him back because they're only interested in him insofar as he can help set up the threat and then disperse of the threat. I don't like that. And a lot of the stuff that deals with magic, I find to be very confusing. He makes everyone forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Okay, I guess they just forgot that he's Spider-Man, or they've just forgotten who Peter Parker is. But do these people have Instagrams? I mean, we know they have TikTok in this world, and I imagine they're making TikToks. I just feel like maybe they would go, scrolling through their phones and be like, who's this guy I had a relationship with, right? What's going on here? Because Happy talks about how he knew Aunt May through Spider-Man. So, I don't need to know everything about the history, but it's it creates confusion here where I don't understand what people know, what they can find out. Can't you just go onto InfoWars Daily Bugle and just scroll and go through past videos and be like, shocker, Mysterio reveals who Spider-Man is? Because I'm assuming this world still has Mysterio and they know who he is, and Spider-Man has clearly existed, and they have big billboards of Spider-Man that say Mysterio was right. I don't know, I feel like it wouldn't take long for them to just remember who he is, because I'm assuming all those stories are still out there, and in Instagram and pictures and all these other things. The ending feels it feels kind of like the Batman versus Superman, no one stays good in this world thing, where we're acting like it was just this inevitable tragic thing that just had to happen. And I'm sitting here well, no, there's 5 or 10 different ways we can do all this. I don't see how in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the next movie they can just completely undo with what we're left here. It would be like an Amazing Spider-Man where Dennis Leary's don't let Gwen know. And then he's like, yes, rip, bro. Anyways, I'm going to go tell Gwen who I am. You know what I mean? It feels like it could be just kind of undoing what the emotional stakes are supposed to be at the end here.
Dennis Leary said, don't tell Harry.
Yes. Exactly.
Sorry, Ben, you were going to say something?
Yeah, with the magic, fair enough with some of it. I feel like such an absolute tool with everything Connor's saying. I'm just I have something I can say against that. Ha ha ha.
No, go for it.
With the Doctor Strange thing, to be fair with the wrangling, I won't agree. I won't argue with you on he detected something. He should have given Peter a way to detect it. Fair enough. You're right on that. With the wrangling though, I would argue that it's a case of he met the lizard in the sewer. He knows he's a villain, and that because clearly he's not a good dude. He's a talking lizard. And I'm guessing he got Pete. It's a guess, but it's what is in my headcanon, I suppose, to make this make sense. That he got Peter to wrangle up the villains for 2 reasons. One, so they don't hurt anybody, especially since he heard about the Doc Ock fight and with how Peter described the Green Goblin. And second, he got Peter to wrangle up the villains because he thinks this is Peter's fault. So he's well, you better clean up your mess. You better clean up your mess, you little brat, or you're grounded.
I get that, but I also feel if he does involve Peter, he just saw how much of a kid he was, and even though they've been on adventures before, he would be like, okay, I have literally no idea what kind of freaky monsters are going to come through. I just fought a lizard man. It's actually probably in Peter's best interest to not get involved because I could be responsible for harming him. You know what I mean? Like that's what the Doctor Strange I'm familiar with in these movies would probably do.
It's very, I guess we just do have differing like thoughts on that sort of thing because Doctor Strange has always kind of been like a even in the comics he was always very much a like, oh, you made that mistake, well you better clean it up, you little.
Yeah, and I should say I would be forgiving of this thing because it's like it's a Spider-Man movie, right? These are Spider-Man villains coming from other universes. Like, obviously, we should have like some way of Spider-Man taking on these foes. Like, I'd be willing and more forgiving of that if a lot of this made more sense to me. Just like given like the way the magic works, and if I like it felt like the story laid out was worth it. But I like I said before, I don't really feel like there's much of a story going on here beyond just go wrangle up bad guys, kid. I got to go do this. Now I'm kind of picking at like, why is this character acting differently than the way I feel like he should be acting? And, you know, Peter wants to involve his friends who don't have any powers that are also minors. Like Doctor Strange should be like, whoa, that is sketch. I don't want to get involved there. So
I with the whole thing of what you're saying with there not being a story told, I just, every time you say that, I'm always just like, I just really do not see that at all. Because it's a case of, I think the story that is being told in this case is that all the way up from Homecoming to this movie, because even in Far From Home, when he's all like, I got to be my own man, he's not learning. People say he learned that lesson again in this movie, which I don't think he fully did. Sorry.
Bless you.
I think it's a case of, like, I think it's, I said this before, but I'm going to reiterate it. The story is Peter learning the lesson that the other two Spider-Men have sort of learned already, because it's the thing of Tobey Maguire very clearly has picked being Peter Parker. He's still Spider-Man, yes, because he said he will always be Spider-Man for Spider-Man 2, but even in the sense of, like, he's married, he possibly has a kid, he comes into the universe in his normal street clothes. Whereas Andrew Garfield picked being like more Spider-Man, but in kind of an unhealthy way. And
that's Peter actually cool. I didn't think about that. Yeah, you're absolutely onto something there.
And Peter has to learn that, like, it's like the Green Goblin, and ever since Homecoming, he's always trying to have like it all. He's always trying to have like, hey, I can have the best parts about being Peter Parker and the best parts about being Spider-Man, but he learns that the world doesn't work that way. That there's too much danger and like hardships with being Spider-Man. So if he wants to take being Spider-Man seriously, he has to commit more to it and focus more on that than being Peter Parker. And so that's why he takes that.
Okay. And I guess I'll say, like, you're right. Like, there is like a sense of Peter like learning a lesson that he supposedly learned previously. I guess like what I had said shortly after watching this was, the way this movie ends, it makes me feel like the last 5 years of Spider-Man I watched didn't matter. So with what they do next, I'll watch it. Like I'm open to see what comes next, but it has actually killed all of my enthusiasm of looking backwards. You know what I mean? Like kind of like usually like a bad sequel in my eyes will like, I now no longer have interest moving forward. But I liked all these things that I have, but moving forward, this almost has that in like reverse for me, where it's like everything I just watched, I guess, didn't really end up mattering. Going forward, we have a clean slate. We can do anything. And we have reports that they want to get Anya Taylor-Joy to be Black Cat in a sequel. I'll be there day one. Sign me up for that. But like, I don't know, like, but I see where you're coming from when you say that, there is the Peter Parker and there is Spider-Man. I don't get a sense, and I guess this is just where we kind of have to agree to disagree. But I do see where you're coming from. I just don't feel like this, like, because we're only now getting with great power comes great responsibility, and that's kind of happening among all these other things. And I guess a reason why that is because the middle act here is a little odd to me. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Comics Kid, which is that I don't like how in Spider-Man 2 there was that like weird moment that everyone likes to kind of make fun of, where it's like Dr. Octopus throws a car at Peter Parker that he does not know is Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And like, just wow, you could have just like, why did you do that, man? You need him to get to Spider-Man, right? This move, but the movie does it because it knows that we already know who Spider-Man is. Mm-hmm. I feel like that one moment is the entire like dramatic problem linchpin of the, like a 20 or 10 minute stretch here where they're just trying to cure all the bad guys. And where in universe, I get why Peter's like, I don't know who these guys are. You know, my Aunt May said they need my help. I've been guilt tripped into doing this. I'll do it. And then, so I get why he's doing it. The problem is where I'm as a movie watcher, I had what you were talking about. Like I kind of know that Peter Parker is able in Spider-Man 2 is able to talk to Dr. Octopus and like redeem him, right? And you have that great scene where Dr. Octopus talks to his arms and he says, "No, you listen to me," and it's great. And he dies a hero. And Kurt Connors gets cured in Amazing Spider-Man. And you know, someone like Electro and the Green Goblin, like, you know, sure, the problem is I don't know when they're getting pulled from, and if you put them back, like, where the problem is like a lot of the drama here that I'm supposed to be hoping for, it's kind of been replaced with confusion that I have, where it's like I'm trying to like think about where are they all going to get put back to, where are they being pulled from, if they cure them, how futile is that actually, does it, you know what I mean, like, and if you do send them back, is that just creating an alternate timeline? Because I guess the way the Marvel multiverse works in one of the versions that we got, either in Loki or in What If, kind of plays on that. And so is there a version of this timeline that is exactly the way we played out? And then when they put them back, is that creating a new branching timeline depending on where they were placed? Like, I got all these kind of questions kind of bubbling in my head. And on top of all of that, I think when it comes to the villains, at best, we have what this is, which is villains from a different movie talking to Peter like they are the Peter from another movie, which is a fundamentally different character. And then at worst, you have Sandman, who's just there to talk to Electro or something. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel like there's a lot of plot here, and there's a lot of different segments to break this movie into if you were to like break this into chapters. And when it comes to the villains, like their chapter, I feel like we don't get like we have. I'll get into that in a little bit, but I feel like a lot of the drama is sort of sagging under the weight of me confused about the rules, and then also having to reconcile characters from other movies being like antagonists for this particular Peter, but because the Peter who is the protagonist of other movies is not this Peter, they don't quite click together like a puzzle. It's like putting two pieces from different puzzles together. At least that's the way it is for me.
Real quick, I'd like to say, number one, I think Anya Taylor-Joy would probably make a better Gwen Stacy. Maybe that's just me.
I honestly think that Black Cat should come way later. Peter's way too young for Black Cat.
all I'll say is just put Anya Taylor-Joy in a movie and I will watch it opening day. That's all.
I heard rumors she's going to be in Madam Web, so.
Well, I guess they have sold one ticket to Madam Web, so.
Also, I agree with you, Connor, and I think this is what I was trying to say about like the Star Trek thing earlier, where like you said, like you're excited or you'll watch what comes next, but you've lost a little bit of interest. I totally agree with you there. This feels very much like a comic book, like, you know, years ago, they did One More Day where Aunt May is dying. And so Peter makes a deal with Satan and says, you know, save Aunt May. And in return, I give up my relationship with Mary Jane. And then like the audience, or at least me, and bear in mind, I've read like 15 Spider-Man stories, you know, probably more than that. But like I'm then from then on, I'm a little confused about, okay, what is the history of the character now? Like, what do the characters remember and what do they not remember, and how did all of these stories play out differently in this timeline where Peter did not marry Mary Jane, you know? And so like in the same way, like, and so I will say this movie is probably the most comic book accurate movie, and because it's doing a reboot and it's confusing. Like when DC, every time DC does a reboot, I'm confused and I don't know what did and did not happen, and then they just keep doing it. And so like this feels comic book accurate, but for me, it's not a good thing.
Sorry, I'm
that
having
hits
some.
hard. I know exactly how that can be.
I've
The
reading
way
Spider-Man comics for a long time, so I agree, and I agree with you. Comics, it still doesn't make sense. The whole one word dating thing.
Yeah.
a lot of people wanna say, hey, that's the way it is in the comics, and I got news for those people that that argument works on. Comics, like movies, most of them aren't very good. uh,
Did you have anything to say about what Connor said, Ben?
I really can't disagree with the confusion thing because it is confusing. You're right in the sense of like where are they taken from, where are they sent back to, but I guess just for me personally, it's just a case of the focus of this movie is on Peter's character and how being around these villains affects him and changes and has him grow as a person. So it's just kind of in the camp of, for me, yes, that's something that is confusing, but it doesn't really matter all that much. It's like
okay.
not something that breaks the movie for me, especially in the case of like, like you're saying with the whole Loki breaking the rules thing. I've done this argument with a lot of people where like Loki basically says any alternate timeline is in itself an alternate universe, um, which I can still say I can find ways around that explanation where it still makes sense that Maguire and Garfield exist in this universe in this multiverse, but I won't get into that. It's a case of the villains are there like any good movie. They're there to like Peter is the focus, and the villains are there to help serve his story. So knowing what happens to them after they get sent back, would it be kind of cool to know? Sure. Does it really matter? No. Does it really affect the story they're telling at the moment? Not really.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Let's get into the villains, because you were saying that like you felt like the villains they serve him, and this is not like a setup to like say you're wrong or whatever. But we clearly have
mainly
different.
Defoe. Mainly
Oh,
Defoe
okay.
is.
Well, because talk to me about this, because like I am curious in hearing this, because as we're talking, I pinpoint how you and I are kind of coming at this from, and I want to just make this very clear to everybody listening, like, and I think this is like equally valid, right? Because it's our own experiences with the piece of art. I think you're definitely viewing this more in terms of like the details of like you have like these justifications like for all these things that I have complaints for, and bravo, like I feel like I'm understanding the appeal of this movie more than I did at the start of this conversation. But and then I feel like I'm coming at this more from like a holistic thing where you point out those details and I'm like, yeah, I can see that and I can see this, but I just feel like when you put all the pieces together, I don't feel like the pieces really fit, and I'm resistant to it. So to talk to me about like the way you feel like the villains really serve Peter's character.
Well, Defoe is the big one that really serves Peter's character, whereas I think the other villains are doing their way of serving. Um, Remember how you said that it was a celebration, and you didn't, like you'd call it a celebration, but you didn't know why, like how you'd call that a celebration. I
Mm-hmm.
think the other villains are there in a set, like aside from like Sandman and Lizard are just kind of there because they needed to fill up space. And I'm not going to disagree with that part of the argument people have made, but I think it is a case of like the three Spider-Men are in this movie because it's a way of showing, look, we're not like other franchises where we've had all these different versions of these characters, and we're going to use this movie to show we're going to make this movie to stop you people from arguing on Reddit all the time about which Spider-Man's better. All of them are valid. Here's proof. They're all in the movie together and they're having a good time. And I think the villains are used in a way to kind of enhance that point of, because it's a case of, like you said, it's a villain from a different movie talking about a different Peter, and that's the thing. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin isn't a typical MCU villain, and he's not a villain that this Peter would face under normal circumstances. Like, even if we got an MCU Green Goblin, he would not be the same as Dafoe. And it's a way of, they're using that as a way of showing, like, in the celebration sense of, like, you see, we have all these different ways you can do Spider-Man, and all of them work just as well. And then for Dafoe, serving Peter's story in general, he's the one who brings in the idea of Peter finally learning, like I said before, that you can't dilly dally. You can't go willy nilly of what you want, Peter. You have to make a choice. If you want to be a grown up, if you want to be a man, you have to choose. Are you going to be Spider Man or Peter Parker? And he's showing that, like, and Goblin wants it to be in a way of the Joker to Batman, where it's, are you going to be yourself and like only care about you and what you're doing, or are you going to be, the hero and be weak and selfless and yeah, gross? I hate it. And that's why he almost wants Peter to kill him with the glider, because then Peter's finally getting away from the responsibility side of things and making a choice for him. And Peter is tempted by that, but then learns with the help of the other Spider-Men that he wants to do the responsible thing for other people, not for himself.
Okay. Comics Kid, do you have any thoughts?
I didn't really see. This is where like I would say this movie was made for audiences that is not me, because I didn't need to see a not a revival. What, I'm not sure what word I'm looking for. I didn't
Reunion?
need to what?
Or reunion?
Yeah, for me, if I'm ever feeling nostalgic about Tobey Maguire, I will just go back and rewatch the first two Sam Raimi movies. And then if I'm ever feeling, this is not meant to be a diss on Andrew Garfield or Mark Webb, but I feel nostalgic about those a lot less than I do the Sam Raimi ones. But if I ever was feeling nostalgic, I would just go and watch those movies, and I didn't need to see those guys again. And so like I saw a lot of people saying like, oh, it's so beautiful when Andrew Garfield saves Zendaya, because he's redeemed himself because he wasn't able to save Emma Stone. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, that sounds callous, but like for me, I just wanted a Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, because my least favorite part about Homecoming and Far From Home was it's Tom Holland, but he's trying to be Iron Man Jr. And like, we finally got past that at the end of Far From Home. And then this one, it's like, it's Tom Holland, but we also are squeezing in the stuff you remember from the other Spider-Man movies. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's not really what I'm looking forward to. And so I do like the concept of this Tom Holland has fought MCU villains, specifically. I mean, even though in the comics, the Vulture and Mysterio are Spider-Man villains, in these movies, they are Iron Man villains that Peter is fighting. And so he is now fighting someone who is a different kind of villain. I like that concept. And you were saying like Electro and Sandman are there to fill up space. I didn't really think we needed them. I didn't think we needed the Lizard. I think we do get the most with Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina. I don't think Jamie Foxx is a bad actor. But here I don't think he gets a whole lot to do. But I do think like Alfred Molina and Willem Dafoe, they're doing a really good job with what they're given. And there's a few parts where Willem Dafoe, like, he's really hamming it up. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember really liking his performance in the first Spider-Man movie. And like even his cameos in the later ones, like I really enjoyed him, just that crazy maniacal smile on his face. I forgot how much I enjoyed that. But I kind of wish we could have just had, let's just have Willem Dafoe come into this movie, into this world, and just Tom Holland fight him, or just have like Electro. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this goes back to me saying like I wanted smaller stakes. Like, I didn't need almost every Spider-Man villain from previous movies. We didn't have everyone. We don't have Dane DeHaan, and we don't have what's his face from the movie Big Fat Liar as the Rhino. So like what is that?
Originally. He was actually like, there are reports that he was going to be there originally, but they cut him out because they wanted to do a Sinister Six of their own later on. It's like, you could have that would have been fun having like Giamatti in there. Like, you might. And you only need.
Oh, go ahead.
Like, you were one off from the Sinister Six. You might as well have gone for it. And I've been. Although it is kind of interesting to think, though, in this sense, not to completely take away from what you're saying, but I just have this thought. It's going to be really interesting if this MCU Peter does fight the Sinister Six later on, because it took 3 Spider-Men to take down 5 villains. How is he going to do against 6 by himself?
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I kind of found disappointing about this is that, I mean, they can do their own Norman Osborn and they can do their own Otto Octavius, but it's going to feel like a hand-me-down Green Goblin and Otto Octavius and Sandman and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like we already saw Spider-Man fight these characters in this world now. We're just going to do it again. not interested in that in the future if that's what it does hold. But speaking to this particular story, I was trying to like pick up on like what these villains could represent. So Green Goblin, represents power, right? Like, what Peter could do if he let go of all responsibility, same as in the 2002 Spider-Man movie. And then we have Dr. Octopus, who I think is sort of representing the necessity of Peter Parker's mind, right? That's something that like Spider-Man can serve as more than just a crime fighter, because we have, he demonstrates that the good Peter is capable of doing by like curing Dr. Octopus, right? That's what he sort of is there to represent. But then we get something like Electro, who he says the word power a lot, so I guess he's also representing power in a kind of broader sense. Lizard represents consequence. I guess not really, but at one point he says there's going to be consequences, and then later he says, "I told you there would be consequences." And then Sandman, he says he doesn't trust anyone a few times. So I don't know. I feel like they gave these characters these recurring words to maybe like they're emblematic of these things, and I just don't feel like those concepts as a unit of villains sort of bounce off of each other. I feel like giving them each a central concept to latch onto is a good idea. And if those concepts were sort of strung together with like a guiding philosophy of Sinister Five, if you will, that would be pretty good. The problem is they all kind of want different things, and they all have different attitudes about what's going on, which is probably a good idea if this movie would be, not longer, but if like you cut other stuff out of the movie and just kind of made, we have a one cure. So we have like one absolute or the other. We can send them all back or cure them all. We can't really do much, right? And if we send them back, we're sending all of them back. Not all of them can stay. And so all of them not really agreeing is a good idea, but that needs to be more of the movie if that's what they're going to go with. I just think as is, a lot of them just sort of have like they only occupy time, and we give them like, I don't trust anybody. He says that a few times so that, it can feel like he has something going on, probably more going on than he really does on the page. But at the end of the day, like I do feel like Otto Octavius, he's just there for Peter to cure, to demonstrate what he's capable of. I just don't feel like him curing Otto feels like a moment for Peter, right? Like it just kind of feels like, yeah, that's what I do. Like I got a replicator machine that can do anything for me. Yep, I can do it. It doesn't feel like it's an accomplishment for him. And then when it comes to like the Green Goblin, like I said earlier, to me it just sort of feels like, you said this was like, appealing to you, Ben, and I can see why, after you kind of explained it. To me though, I don't really, when it comes to Green Goblin, he talks about how he sees Peter struggling to have it all. And I don't really see what he's seeing there, because what I'm seeing is I'm running out of time. I got to wrangle up some bad guys. And even though his identity is exposed, to me, it doesn't really feel like it's affecting him as Spider-Man all that much. He's still like being Spider-Man, doing Spider-Man things, and he's able to get into college, or like, because he rescues the college lady, being Spider-Man, it helped him out in that sense. So I don't know. I feel like that all, like, if he just took care of it all, and if the only thing that's happening is if the multiverse was not coming unraveled, then like he could have gotten done with all this just fine.
I have something to say to that also.
Yeah.
I will say that the Goblin knowing that is a little bit of either off-screen shenanigans or he somehow has access to the script. But it's a case of, I think, of him wanting to have it all, in the sense of with the Doctor Strange spell at the beginning, where maybe it's not a case of like the identity thing itself is affecting his life as Spider-Man or as Peter Parker or whatever, but it's a case that with that spell, he could have just, let Doctor Strange do the spell originally and then have that be what happens. But he keeps going like, oh wait, no, oh shoot, no, my Aunt May has to know, and oh wait, no, my girlfriend has to know, wait, no, Ned has to know, and Happy, and this person, and cherry picking, and that's him trying to have it all, because to him, the perfect life he would want, like he told MJ at the beginning, was if Aunt May, Happy, Ned, and MJ, knew his identity, and he didn't have to worry about it aside from that. But the thing is, that's a dangerous game, and that's not how it works. So he was being irresponsible and trying to pick both sides, and that's what the Goblin sees. I'm guessing because since Norman knows he's trying to get into college, maybe Peter talked about it with Norman on the way to Happy's apartment off screen. I don't know, but
yeah, I feel like when the way it plays out is that like the movie is sort of really biased in trying to get the events to line up a certain way, because like I said, Doctor Strange could have just been like, you know, rummaging through his closet, decided to do the ritual there, send them all back and say, all right, kid, take 2. You know what I mean? You can only pick 3, and he can say, all right, let's do this tomorrow. I can smuggle Tony Stark's replicator out of Happy's apartment, and then that way I can make suits all the time, and then we can just make Happy forget, and then I can have Aunt May. You know, one of them has to go. Cool, I can just tell him again. Like you know what I mean? Like I feel like the movie has to sort of line it up a certain way to where it feels contrived. And I get that all stories are contrived, but the art of storytelling is to make it not feel like it's contrived. And I feel like there's like a few different ways, as if Doctor Strange wasn't just so quick to, all right, let's do the spell right now, and they just took a day to think this over, it would have all gone much more smooth. And I think them just kind of doing it as a snap decision, it's more glaring when a doctor, middle-aged man is like complicit in it. And apparently this character who makes this decision was not Doctor Strange, it was America Chavez, which is a decision I think, you know, makes a lot more sense considering her age.
Yeah, that is one thing I will say is that this Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, the original plan was for America Chavez, like you said, to cause the spell and all that. Doctor Strange should have been delayed. That movie should have come out first, and this should have come out after that. Because especially since, you know, not to get into Doctor Strange, but this movie I feel like has a lot bigger stakes than that movie does, even though like I felt more of the stakes of like the multiverse being in trouble with this movie than I did in Doctor Strange, but that's neither here nor there. I think it's just the thing with this movie, and why I guess I'm a little bit less hard on it than you, and maybe it's not fair for me to do this, is that there's a lot of cases in this movie of either getting the best out of a bad situation, or in some other cases, doing the best you can with some studio mandates, because it is obvious to a point that it was the studios that went, let's have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield and these villains in this story.
Yeah, I mean, Avi Arad got one hell of a special thanks at the end.
he did.
I felt that energy very hard. Yeah.
Yes, I did. But I do think it's a case of, and then then COVID hit also at the same time when they were filming. So yes. I think I'm a little bit more fair to it, because it is a case of this movie would have been probably better, and especially since it would have come out after Doctor Strange like originally planned. If they would have been able to make the movie that was in development when it was in development, but they had to do a lot of things of like, okay, well, we can't have the lizard in, or we can't have this scene here because of COVID. We can't do this because Doctor Strange comes out after now. So again, it should stand on its own, and I think it does stand on its own for the most part. But I'm a little bit more lenient on it with some of those things, because it is a case of, shoot, we have to fix this fast because we have a date and Sony's not willing to budge, but COVID's making this a big pain in the arse. So what do? Oh, let's do this. Okay, this will work because about 98% of people won't care about this. So
yeah, well, and I understand that, but I also I'm going to be less forgiving of it, specifically because the Batman exists, and the Batman's not a movie I'm like crazy about, but man, is that a good looking movie. Even though it's not an aesthetic I'm particularly like crazy about, like for what they're going for, it's one of the best versions of that I've seen.
I got my own issues with the Batman, but we're not here to talk about the Batman.
No. But the reason I compare this to that is, look, the one thing I'm not going to budge on is this movie looks, I think, like it's so ugly that I can't give it a pass. It is so apparent that in most scenes these actors aren't even in the same space, and like the green screen compositing is so apparent. The cinematography is so flat, and like this was so clearly made in a time crunch, and this is where I got like really frustrated with it. Where when Andrew, oh my God, I didn't do that on purpose. I'm sorry. When Tom Holland gets up to the top of like his stairs, and there's like Hannibal Buress, Martin Starr, JB Smoove standing perfectly still in a line, and they're in one shot, and it's this flat angle, like it's a Wes Anderson movie, and they just start like improvising. I knew like the second that shot started, I was like, oh, this is the only shot these characters will be in. And I was right. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, I just saw, like, we have 4 hours to make this movie, so let's get on it. And I understand that, like, and I just felt really bad for John Watts personally, because this is not his movie. Like, and this is a Sony executives movie. And this felt like he just had to be the avatar to say action cut for like the vision of Amy Pascal or somebody. And the haphazard way it's all put together. I don't like the action scenes in this movie. I don't remember like a lot of them. I don't know, like it. And a lot of it does kind of come down to the last time I saw a lot of these characters like previously, I was looking at a Sam Raimi movie, and I don't simp for those Sam Raimi movies the way a lot of people do, but Sam Raimi knows how to like frame a shot and storyboard a sequence, and this stuff just like I don't know. It's very apparent to me that the disparity between the action scenes the last time I saw Dr. Octopus and this time I'm seeing him. I don't know, like the production of this in like the really, I feel, cheap way in which it's made to, like the description I've used in the past is, to me it looks like it's held together by digital tape. Like it bothers me that this made $200 million or made $2 billion and cost $200 million. Like it looks considerably cheaper to me anyways.
I have no comment on that. I didn't really notice any cinematography, and I'm, usually, Connor, when you and I talk about stuff like that, I don't really notice that kind of thing. The only thing I felt like I did notice was, it seemed to me that like, and I think I had read that Thomas Hayden Church had filmed almost all of his stuff remotely. And so I was kind of keeping an eye out for that. And I was like, oh, he's in sand form the entire movie. And I didn't remember a scene in Spider-Man 3 where he gets like stuck in sand form. So I was a little confused about that. And then at the end, I wasn't sure if he like loses his powers or if he's just able to go back to being human and back to being sand at will again. But like, really, I didn't notice, like, for example, nothing really stood out for me with the teachers at the school.
I will say, though, that is an example, that scene with Sandman is a perfect example of Connor saying digital tape, considering when Sandman turns back, they reuse a shot from Spider-Man 3.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Of course, it's been a while since I've seen Spider-Man 3.
They sort of like Princess Leia did from Rise of Skywalker, where they just sort of took.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and same thing with Risa Fonz turning back into the Lizard. They just reused a shot from Amazing Spider-Man 1.
Oh, okay.
But again, that is the case. From what I've read, the reason that Lizard, whatever, you could just have him be CG the whole time. From what I've read, the reason for Thomas Hayden Church being Sand the whole time and for not being there on set is because of COVID. Like, because of I think he was in a different country at the time, and there was like, he wouldn't be able to get there anyway, or like maybe he was too scared of the risk or something like that. But COVID's the main reason I've heard that he wasn't on set, and like why he just kind of recorded his audio for those scenes. Not that that's an excuse. I mean, it is an excuse, but not like, it's not an excuse for like why it might not work in the movie. But I'm saying that's more so what I mean when I was saying before, of like they did the best with the bad situation they had, and Sony definitely should have delayed the movie and like let it be made with much stronger digital cinematic duct tape. You get some flex film.
Get some gorilla tape on there. Yeah.
I also. So a big thing for me, like where Connor, I think, is more of a you're into like the cinematography and stuff, and not to say like I'm really into like, do the character motivations work? And I'm not saying you're not into that, Connor. But a thing for me, at one point, like near the end, all the villains show up at the Statue of Liberty, and I was thinking, okay, so Max Dillon wants to stay in this universe. and he says, like, I like the way my body looks now. I don't look like I did in Amazing Spider-Man 2. But I'm confused, like, now that his body has reformed and he's not blue, and he's also not, he doesn't look like he did, before he turned into Electro. But when they send him back, is his body going to look like it did in Amazing Spider-Man 2? And I guess that's more of me questioning the magic.
No, because they cured him and he still looks like how he does now. He's just a regular guy at the end.
So then I guess my question is, like, as far as character motivation is, why does Max want to stay in this universe?
Because of the energy of the arc reactor, and that's a different kind of energy than what he had in the Amazing Spider-Man timeline, and it's a stronger energy, and he wants to be around that.
Okay. Can't you just say, hey, Max, we're going to cure you and send you back? Wouldn't you like that? Like, I don't know. I feel like that.
Well, Max's whole thing in this movie, and even in Amazing Spider-Man 2, was him not being seen and wanting more power to be seen by everybody. And having the arc reactor is a way of being like, I got the best power. Look at me, everybody. Like, so that's why he wouldn't want to be cured, because if he was cured, he would go back to being a nobody, which is what he doesn't want.
Yeah. And I think I probably just completely missed the line where he liked the energy from the arc reactor. That one either flew over my head or I just wasn't paying attention. But and then, like, Sandman, he's like, attacking Peter and saying, like, where's the box? And I was thinking, why is he attacking? Like, and I was like, well, he probably just wants to get back to his daughter. But like, if he had listened to, like, any of the characters in this movie, he knows that Peter eventually wants to send everyone back. So I'm confused why he's attacking Tom Holland. And then at one point, Lizard looks up and sees that Ned is unable to close the portal, so he decides he's going to jump in and attack Michelle and Ned. And I was like, why does he want to attack them? Like, his thing in Amazing Spider-Man was, I want to turn everyone into lizards. And here, like, attacking them is not going to help him achieve his goals. And so, like, for me, like you were saying earlier, Ben, that Willem Dafoe works the best, and I agree, because a lot of these others, they just kind of feel like they're here, and it's like, well, they can't just be here. We have to give them something to do, but for a lot of them, that something just didn't really make sense or work for me.
To be a little fair to Sandman, I think the reason he's attacking Tom Holland to get the box is because ever since he met Tom Holland's Spider-Man when they were fighting Electro, he sees Peter shoot a web at Electro and have him disappear. And Peter goes like, whoa, it's okay, Flint, trust me. And he goes, I don't trust you. I don't even know you. And so Peter might be saying, hey, I'm going to send you back to your world. So I'm going to cure you. But he doesn't trust Peter, and he just wants the box so he can go back home himself.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair.
That scene was okay. You know what? Never mind. That's just taking that moment and going into kind of a pedantic point on editing. But sorry, continue with what you guys were talking about.
Well, that was basically it for me. Like, the villains, I think I'm gonna co-sign what Ben said, that, like, I really like what they're doing with Willem Dafoe, and I like what they're doing with Alfred Molina. I think Jamie Foxx has a couple of good moments. I was really expecting them to send Jamie Foxx to the universe where Into the Spider-Verse takes place. When he said, like, I thought that you were, when he said to Andrew Garfield, I thought you were black. And I thought, oh, they're going to send him to the Spider-Verse universe and he'll get to meet Miles Morales. But they didn't do that. That's okay. I
legit thought Miles Morales was going to show up and it was going to be like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and he was going to be animated swinging around next to him.
Or Spider-Ham.
Oh my God.
I'm trying to think if there was any. I'm trying to think if there's. This is like a 10-second complaint. I thought it was weird when Doctor Strange did the thing where he pushes Peter's soul out of his body, and then for some reason Peter's body is still able to resist like Doctor Strange. I thought that was weird, and as far as I can tell, they didn't explain that or how.
I figured that was just his Spidey sense, like kicking in.
It is his spider sense. His spider sense is, especially if Peter's not focusing, his spider sense is strictly like reflexes, and his spider sense is seeing like, oh, this strange man in a cloak is trying to grab my box. let's stop that. So like move out of the way and like. And plus, his spider sense lately in the comics has been very magic in nature, even if it doesn't make any sense to do it that way. But
Mhm.
um,
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so
you
I
go
have-
ahead, sorry.
I have a whole page of notes about Spider-Man meeting Electro and Sandman. First of all, we get the new toy where he has a black suit, and he achieves this by turning his old costume inside out. I'm sure anyone out there could defend this. I don't care. I just think that's one of the stupidest things, like ever.
Oh, I agree with you actually on that. I think that costume is dumb, and the reason for it is dumb.
I mean, Aunt May gets it out. I'm just saying, you got paint splash on you at a montage 5 months ago, and in the last 5 months, Aunt May hasn't gotten it out for you. Okay. Well, I was gonna say I actually work with green paint that you cannot get out of clothing, so I figured it was that green paint, and then it wasn't because Aunt May could get it out. So I just wanted to say that then we get the iconic line for me, anyways. Peter, it's me, Flint Marko. You remember? I just want to give that an award, special honors. Worst line in film 2021. Hey, you guys remember? Hey, Freeze, I'm Batman. Hashtag same energy. Hey, Peter, it's me, Flint Marko. You remember? I mean, wow. Okay. So I also think like that scene, the way it plays out, is kind of weird. Where you have he first meets Sandman. It's this giant man made of sand shows up. He's like, "Hi, Peter, it's me." And then Peter's like, "Oh my God, there's this electric guy. You surround him and I'll pull the plug." That's the line. You surround him and I'll pull the plug. Peter, how do you know how Sandman's powers work? How do you know he can just become a dust storm and surround him? I guess he understands how Electro's powers work because he can see that Electro's drawing energy out of the things. But when that was okay, whatever. I guess I'll take it. Maybe I'm just nitpicking. But this is like where it comes to editing. This is where like editing is kind of important, and this is where it's causing confusion in me. So Electro, Peter, and Marko are all just kind of standing around, and then Electro says, "We all just gonna pretend like I'm not like naked right now," and then Peter's like, "Oh, whoops," and then he like looks over and looks away, and then he sees like a shed that has like electrician outfit in it, and then we close up of like clothes in the electrician's closet. Cut to Electro in clothes appearing in the cell. So that cut right there, it implies like time passage, right? Like, bam, you get the message. They got clothes on him. He zapped him back. But then we cut back to Peter hanging out with Marko, and Marco's like, "What did you just do to him? Did you kill him? Whoa, I'm a nice guy. And he's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know you. I'm gonna murder you. Like it's like he like starts losing his mind. I'm like, whoa, that dialogue exchange that implies an immediacy that betrays the previous cut's passage of time. I feel like there's like missing footage here where it's like they get the like Electro in costume and go, "All right, I got you, bye," and then he zaps him. Because then later it's weird once they get Sandman back into like the CW like private prison, like there's like this part where Electro's talking to Sandman. He says, "You picked the wrong side." What? Like what is that alluding to? Like I feel like there's like footage missing here. Like what is this, like what side are you picking? Like what? I feel like that's referring to a conversation that we didn't see that might lead to why Sandman was angry about Peter sending Electro. And I know this is like a very small, like almost inconsequential series of edits, but like I feel like it's indicative of a greater whole where there's like confusion amongst the storytelling versus pacing.
Ben, do you have any thoughts?
We have such different like things that like are focused on. We're looking at movies because I wasn't really thinking about any of that stuff. Like I'll still notice bad editing and like those sorts of things, but I think this is just like proof of what you're talking about before, Connor. That you were looking at it from a very like broad sense, in the sense of like you're looking at it from the cinematography and from editing and like this and this and this and this thing. Whereas I'm very much like I'm taking this magnifying glass and I'm looking at the smaller things. And the good small things build up to make a nice whole for me. Whereas you look at it more like it's not. I'm not trying to criticize. I'm not trying to say this is the wrong way of looking at it.
No, absolutely.
Like I imagine it like if there's like a dish, like a dish of food. You look at it as very much like here's my broad feelings on this pasta puttanesca that we have in our bowls. Like like a more broad sense of like here's everything in the biggest terms that can make me like show how I feel about this thing. Whereas I'm looking at it more in a sense of like, oh, I noticed the flavoring here and like this spice here and like this little, this little piece of parsley over here and like, and there again, neither is the wrong way to look at it, but I think it causes both of us to notice things that the other one really wouldn't care about, and I just think that's interesting. And it's not that's why I can't argue with what you're saying because I'm sure you're right about it, but it is a case of like I didn't notice this editing thing you're talking about, and even when you're talking about it, I'm like, that really matter to me personally? Not really. Mm-hmm. Like I've always been more of a story and script guy myself anyway.
Yeah, and I should be said, like if this was just like I just this thing I noticed, and if this was like the only thing that was bothering me, it wouldn't even bother me. That's a complete contradiction, but whatever. I also have a quick question to throw out, guys. Aunt May calls Peter and says, "I'm at work, and one of the guys you're looking for just walked in." Now my question is, when did Peter tell Aunt May that there were multiversal invaders that to be out on the lookout for?
Probably off screen while him and Ned and MJ were looking around. Like that's my best guess. But.
Okay.
I can't help you because here's my dirty secret. Since this was a 2.5-hour movie, I spread it out over a few days. So there's some events that are a little fuzzy. Yeah, I know. Anytime a movie gets over that 2-hour mark, I'm like, ooh, can you not do that? But I think a lot of that stuff in the first half, I watched it yesterday. So I don't know. Sorry, Connor.
No, it's fine. I don't know how many other points you guys have to hit. My last note, well, 2 notes. One, I just don't like that Peter can cure all of the villains because he has a magical Stark machine that can make anything instantly. I just think that's bad screenwriting. Like in an afternoon, they like just create cures. You know what I mean? It's not like they're hanging out for like a week and eating Cheetos. I think that would be kind of cool myself. But
not to completely stop the point, but to be a little fair to that, the fabricator starts the process and then the 3 Peters finish it. Like it's not like the only one that the fabricator actually finishes is
Otto.
Is Otto's, whereas the other ones don't get finished, and in the case of the one that it tried to make for the Goblin, didn't even work. So.
Okay.
I'll go ahead, Connor.
Well, and then when it comes to this is just another like kind of broad frustration I have with the movie, where we get all of these bad guys, they're in their cells, and we just kind of got them all together so they can exchange notes. And these just felt like SNL scenes to me. I cringe when I have to hear, "Max, what happened to you? Last time I saw you, you had bad teeth, a comb over, and glasses. Did you get a makeover?" "No, I got electricity, man." "Oh, well, I could give you a makeover. Not into Elizabeth." Like, oh my God. It makes my skin crawl. And then you gotta be careful where you fall, man. And then like later we get all the Peter Parkers together. And like, I guess I'll give it this. It wasn't Ghostbusters Afterlife, where like the Ghostbusters just show up to be a Deus Ex Machina. At least it wasn't that. I mean, they're in it for like a half hour. But I didn't like that we basically just kind of get them all together to just trade notes. "Hey, I got web shooters. Ooh, I don't. Whoa, what's up with that? You're amazing, man. Say it. You're amazing.
Of the movie.
You're amazing. You're amazing. My back. Remember my back memes? I gotta pop my back. It's like, yes, hey, yeah, I'm a scientist myself, baby. Like, oh my God, I was disappointed that like it felt like I think Jay Bauman of Red Letter Media pretty much put it perfectly, in my opinion, when he said like it was like the world's longest Super Bowl ad, where it's like you have Chevy Chase and it's like, look, we're doing Christmas Vacation again, for like a Super Bowl ad, and it's like we got all the actors in it, but it looks like an advertisement. Like this is what that felt like to me, where it's like Tobey Maguire is just like, yep, it's just Tobey Maguire showed up in a shirt, and they're just kind of like talking, and then he has a Spider-Man costume on. It's like, hey, like it doesn't feel like he's playing that character to me. Like I don't know, it felt so like SNL sketch-esque to me.
Two things to that. One, it's funny you mentioned an ad, because there actually is a really funny edit that I found of No Way Home that I wish I could find. If I find it, I'll send it to you. Where someone took like a burrito commercial. I think it was like a Taco Bell burrito commercial, where burritos are like flying around, and it's like burritos, they'll be great for your life. And then it has Alpha Molina going like, wait, you're gonna cut some cures in a condominium and put some new cures in a microwave, and then the burrito starts flying around, and then it cuts at the end. It's like, buy our new burrito. Then it cuts to Willem Dafoe going, I can go for a burrito.
That's great.
Speaking of, oh, go ahead, Ben.
The actual argument I was going to make against that is, like I said, I'm really sad that like you feel that way about like the scene of the three Peters talking, because that was actually my favorite scene in the movie. Because it's a weird balancing act, because if you're getting the three Peters together, isn't the whole fun of it getting them to talk and getting them to just, that's what I said I wanted. Like if they would have just popped up at the end, like you're saying in Ghostbusters Afterlife, that would have been absolutely ridiculous and stupid. But the fun of it is, when it was rumored they were going to be in it, what I wanted was just give me a scene of the three of them sitting down talking, preferably over a piece of pizza so someone could say pizza time. And that's what I got. When they have conversations that the three of them would have, because they would talk about the fact that it's really weird that Tobey Maguire can shoot webs out of his wrist and they can't, or that two of them have fought aliens and one of them hasn't, or the only line out of that whole exchange that was a little cringy was, hey, Andrew Garfield from the Amazing Spider-Man series, did you know that you're amazing? Wink, wink. I said the thing. Did you hear I said the thing? That,
yeah, no, like I get that there is an inherent novelty to like, hey, these people have some of these conversations. My thing is that like it felt like
you're not going to do that, then why bring them in?
Well, you have them to have serious conversations. You know what I mean? Like have them like talking about stuff, and not just like, what's the plot? Okay, we spent 3 sentences kind of exchanging what the plot is. Okay, anyways, memes, guys. Am I right? Like I didn't.
Fun conversation. They do have like serious conversations.
Yeah, like Pete, Toby and Andrew, they talk about like, do you have anyone back home? And Andrew says no.
But it's just comparing notes. That's my problem. It's just in that like, how do we contrast with one another? Okay, we've acknowledged how we contrast with one another. I don't know. Like I know it would slow the movie down like maybe more, but like I'm thinking about like the conversations that Miles has with Peter B. Parker in Into the Spider-Verse, and those are like both talking about how they contrast and they're different with one another, but it's also focusing the dialogue into like kind of what the story's about. And I like that. And this just kind of felt like, let's trade notes. And I find that I feel like these people would have much more interesting conversations than just, I fought an alien and you haven't. And hey, I got a woman back home. I used to. I don't anymore. Anyways, I'm going to catch your girlfriend and cry about it. I don't know. I don't like that.
Speaking of Tobey Maguire, that is, I mentioned this a long time ago, and it's something I did want to discuss. That, and like you said, this was slow the movie down, but it does frustrate me a little bit. And again, I don't have much more to talk about because also it is getting insanely late, and I work at like 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's fine. I've slept worse. I'm having a good time, so I don't really care. But I'll keep talking if we can. But the point I'm trying to make is, with Tobey Maguire specifically, and it's with the scene of them talking in the scaffolding, where they're like, hey, what are some of the craziest villains you guys have fought? The fact that Tobey doesn't mention any other villain and like nothing is mentioned at all really of what's happened with him, it's weirdly felt like, okay, so Spider-Man 3 happened to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And then within, 2005 is when that movie takes place, so, and this takes place in 2026, so within 21 years, nothing has happened at all. Like Peter hasn't fought a single new villain at all. And I find that really hard to believe. And actually a little annoying. I mean,
Yeah.
apparently that was Tobey Maguire's decision. The writers are saying they were actually going to make him be in charge of Parker Industries, which is a terrible idea. That doesn't fit his character at all. But like it's a thing of like it's frustrating in the sense of like with Andrew Garfield, we know stuff has happened. He's even saying like, oh, after Gwen's death, I stopped pulling my punches. I got bitter. Like, so we know some stuff has happened. Like time's passed in his world. Whereas with Tobey Maguire's, he's gotten older, but nothing interesting has happened. We don't even know if him and Mary Jane are married, for God's sakes. Like, and again, it doesn't matter. It would slow the movie down, but it is also a thing of you could have mentioned a single line. Like, here's an example. What are some of the craziest villains you guys have fought? Mine was this guy called the Vulture, and Toby goes, "Oh, I fought a guy called the Vulture." Or even a simple line that I noticed about it would have been, everyone's been clamoring, Tobey Maguire has to fight the Lizard, which he technically does in this movie, but that's beside the point. Which is like, hey guys, the Lizard guy's here. If he just would have said like, Dr. Connors, or you have a lizard too, like you could have used one line to reference, hey, he did fight the Lizard. You just didn't see it. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Again, it doesn't matter really, but it is still kind of like you couldn't have given us like a line, like one line. That's like I said, that was something that frustrated me in the theater because there was a lot of rumors going around with this movie before it came out of like all this talk about like how these worlds are different and how like the biggest rumor being that Tobey Maguire would he'd be married to Mary Jane and they'd have a daughter, Mayday Parker, which would be great. And it's actually kind of brought up to my point where like everyone's talking about like, oh hey, let's bring Miles Morales into the MCU. I think Miles would be a lot more interesting in the Tobey Maguire universe than he would in the MCU. But
yeah, especially with that age gap, if they kept Miles as like a teenager and had like a not exactly like this, but like Batman Beyond, where he's kind of a mentor, older mentor. I'd watch that. I know.
Plus, Tom Holland is basically a white Miles Morales anyway.
Yeah. I guess the way I would describe it is the conversations that I wish they would have been like if you were to get me and my brothers in a room to talk, we would like maybe talk about like, hey, I would talk to my little brother about like this is what I wish I would have done if I was in your position. This is like the thing that like I'm doing. And like then like I could talk with like my twin brother and be like, hey, life's kind of rough and this is the way I handle situations. And then he could say, well, do you ever think that maybe like, you could have done it this way? I don't know if I would have done that way, but like, this is the way I handle situations. It's like, it just kind of, it's not like we're in a room going, hey, I have a crush on a redhead. No way, me too. Wait, why? I'm actually more into brunettes. Am I right? Oh, okay, cool. Did you have Mr. Blacksmith for science? Yes, I did. Oh, what? No way. Like, like that's what it feels like the difference is.
Don't we still kind of have a conversation like that though? Maybe
we have like one or two. Like the point I'm talking about is like you can nitpick and find like an example of what I'm looking for. It doesn't change the tide though. That's what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
Did anyone have anything else? Not trying to like wrap this up since Ben said he had to work in the morning, but I pretty much hit everything I wanted to say. I
have genuinely hit everything I can think of with this movie. I've said a lot more than I thought it would. This has gone on a lot longer than I thought it would. I originally told my girlfriend I'd be on here for like an hour.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Rachel. Send her my best. I am truly sorry. I hope you've had a good.
I've been quiet, so she doesn't really care all that much.
And I hope you've had a good time. I hope you haven't felt like this is us like ganging up on you or anything. But
I think it's been pretty. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I hope that I haven't proved myself to be an idiot who doesn't know how to say his opinions. That's sounding dumb.
No, I think it's been a pretty well balanced. Like I was going into this, I thought it was going to be mostly me and Connor hating on it, but I think I am somewhere. I'm closer to being in the middle of you two than what I thought. I'm still like very cooled on the MCU, but there are moments in the movie where I was like, I did like this more than I initially thought I did. But so yeah, I may even watch it again. My library has it. I watched it via a certain internet library that someone in this podcast is allowing me to use. But I was I may, my library has it now, so I may try watching it again in the future.
Well, this is the movie that actually let me discover that, I got the digital copy with my Blu-ray, and I discovered, I can't believe I didn't realize this, that if I own the digital copy of the movie, I can actually watch it right on YouTube.
Oh, on YouTube.
Oh, YouTube's retailer? Oh, I should link it up.
Well, no, it's not. I got it on like Google Play, but because I got it on Google Play, if you go and look at the movie on YouTube, it'll say purchased if you're like on your YouTube account, and it's just there.
Oh, well, maybe I should get a Google Play account and link that up to my Movies Anywhere, and yeah. So
that's the thing. Like, if I wanted to watch this, I can watch that. If I want to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League on YouTube, I can. Like,
oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So just to not to belabor this all a little bit longer, I did just need to say the scene where
we 6-hour-long conversation.
Yeah. But like the scene where all the Peters come through the portal, I gotta break this apart a little bit. So you have like it's almost like a comical reveal. It's like, man, we're looking at on the news, like the Happy's apartment building's on fire. There's villains running around. But Peter didn't text us to tell us to push the button. Like, come on, guys. You should have pushed that button a long time ago. And then they're like, you know what? I wish Peter Parker were here. And then, Ned knows magic on accident because this is supposed to be America Chavez. But, even though Doctor Strange trained for years, Ned can just do magic on accident because, his grandma says that they have magic in their blood. Okay, whatever. So then he says, I wish I saw Peter Parker. And they open it up, and then Andrew Garfield comes through, and they're like, you know what? Let's just keep doing this until we get the Peter Parker. And then they open up another portal, and then Tobey Maguire shows up, and they're like, hey, it's them. And they're like, well, let's go. Does your Peter have a place that he just goes to get away from things? Yeah, he does. Or alternately, question, you can just open up a third portal and maybe he'll be there. But they don't do that. Or you can just keep opening portals and finding more Spider-Mans. Maybe you could do that.
Maybe Nicholas Hammond is in there somewhere.
Yeah, maybe. And then also, like, it's kind of convenient. They just run into all these, like, I don't know. What about Joey Diaz from Spider-Man 2? Why isn't he here? You know what I mean? He said, if you want him, you got to go through me on the train, But he's not here. Oh, well. But, like, the thing is, that whole scene was just, like, again, it felt like the Charlie Cox thing of you're so excited to see Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire show up. Like, everything that scene is doing is, like, just push the button. Like, we got this guy, and that should just be said for me. And the only reason we actually have this device that has a button on it is so that non-magical people can interact with a magical MacGuffin. And then also, I'm just on hashtag Team Doctor Strange this whole time because he's acting like they treat him like he's like some ruthless jerk when he's just like, I mean, look at the entire multiverse is coming apart, or it's in danger of coming apart. Infinite number of trillions of people on one hand, 4 dudes. An infinite number of infinite people are at stake, the 4 guys. And then it's frustrating to me that they make this whole a whole thing about rehabilitation when he's just like, look, simple calculus says we could all die at any moment. We got to send these people back. And then they're like, but we got to cure these 4 people if we can. To me, that's not a debate. Like, harm mitigation versus rehabilitation is not a debate. And I think that's why they just string up Doctor Strange and get rid of him until he can resolve the conflict at the end, because the debate they're having between, Doctor Strange's mouthpiece and Aunt May's mouthpiece, it's like the sports equivalent to this would be who's the better basketball player, Brett Favre or Muhammad Ali. It's like this isn't at all related to one another, and I'm like, what's going on here? Those are big kind of philosophical conflicts with the movie that I just could not get on the same page with, and those are the end of my notes. That's it. I'm sorry. Anyways, that's it. That's all I have.
The only thing I can say on that is that my only real big issue with the scene of the two Tobys, the 2 Peters popping up, is mainly the fact of it's definitely what you're calling a tear moment, even to the point that when Andrew Garfield pulls his mask off, the movie gets really quiet so people can applaud.
Yep, that's true.
And it's great in the theater because people did applaud both times I saw the movie in the theater. really awkward when you're by yourself in your underwear watching it on your TV.
Hey, I watched this when I had COVID a few weeks ago. I was definitely, sporting the boxers and just chilling. Know exactly how that is.
It's not as bad with Maguire, but it's really bad with Andrew. Like, he pulls the mask off, and there's just this like a good 3 or 4 second pause before he says anything. So,
Yeah.
that's my only real issue with it, because that definitely did feel like a moment like, now applaud, audience. This is a live, like, Spider-Man No Way Home was filmed in front of a live studio audience. Like,
Jerry Seinfeld is Spider-Man. What's the deal with portals? What's going on here?
Hello, Osborn. Those
My
are
best friend Kramer got turned into a goblin. What's the deal with that?
Doc Ock's getting upset.
So those are our thoughts on No Way Home. I'm surprised I didn't once accidentally call it Far From Home, because I've been doing that since they announced the title. I still, Connor, when you and I talked about Homecoming, and you said you wanted the next one to be called The Winter Formal, and I am to this day just livid that they didn't just have each movie be a different high school dance. I really wish they could have done that. So that's all we have. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
Ben, I love you. Thanks for being here, man.
No problem. I'm happy to be here. It was actually good. I had a really bad day at work today, so this is kind of like a good uplifting thing to end the day on.
Oh, good. I'm not good that you had a bad day. I'm glad this helped make your day better.
Well, and I'm glad we can have the avid disagreements and then bring it on in for a hug at the end.
I secretly hate you.
Connor, do we want to do some more Twin Peaks stuff in the future?
We still didn't find our Twin Peaks connection in this movie.
Well, possibly.
Maybe there was a caterer who worked on Twin Peaks that worked on this movie.
Perhaps. I actually just watched an episode of Seinfeld last night with Spencer, and it had Grace Zabriskie and Warren Frost in it.
So well, there you go. There's your next review.
Yeah, it's on Netflix, so we might want to talk about that. So
okay, yeah. Because I think the last Twin Peaks thing we talked about was my choice. So it's if you wanted to go for a Seinfeld, I could do a Seinfeld if you wanted to.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, then we will do that in a couple weeks. Ben, thank you for joining us. And everyone listening, thank you for listening. And we will, you'll have something to listen to again in a couple weeks. In the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099.
Connor Nielsen.
And I'm just a guy.
And we'll see you in the future. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All righty. Thank you, guys.
That was like 3 hours long. Jesus Christ.
Because we didn't start. It was probably about 2.5 hours because we talked, did the warm up